This is the meeting of October 21st. We'll note that all commissioners are present. First item of business is the order of business. Are there any changes to the order of business? Hearing none, would there be a motion then to approve the order of business?
So moved.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The motion carries. Next item then is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda you wish to discuss or have questions about? Not, would there be a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Oltmans?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to the non-timetable agenda, and the first item there is to hear the financial report by Mrs. Johnson.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. I'll highlight a few items from our financial report through September. We'll start with the general fund report. With 75% of the year completed, our property taxes equal $3.3 million, and we're 97% collected compared to budget. Our other taxes and fees total $207,000 and is 85% collected compared to budget. Our intergovernmentals, which include the revenues we receive from state and local governments, such as the highway distribution tax and the oil production tax, totals $2.5 million and is 61% collected compared to budget. Our licenses, fees, and services includes building permit revenue, oil royalties, and administrative fees, and is 72% collected compared to budget. Our building permit revenue is up $210,000 over last year, and our municipal court fines are up $36,000 over last year. Our total general fund revenues equal $8.4 million through September, and we're 63% collected compared to budget. Our general fund expenses are broken down into groups. Our general government, which includes our administration, court, finance, and buildings and grounds, is 78% expended compared to budget. The overage is due mostly to prosecution and attorney costs. Our public safety, which includes police and fire, is 64% expended compared to budget. Our engineering and streets is 83% expended compared to budget. This overage is due to plan reviews in our engineering department and budgeted equipment purchases in the street department. Our cultural services, which includes museum and forestry, is 70% expended compared to budget. And our total general fund expenses equal $9.6 million through September, and we're 71% expended compared to budget. In our enterprise funds, our water and wastewater revenues total $7 million through September, and we're 95% collected compared to budget. And our expenses and capital outlays total $11.4 million. This includes a $4.6 million transfer to the Building Construction Fund from the state revolving loan fund for the water reclamation facility. And it is 92% expended compared to budget. Our solid waste fund revenue is $3.4 million through September, which is 89% collected compared to budget. And our expenses and capital outlays total $2 million, which is 53% expended compared to budget. In our sales tax reports, in our 1% sales tax fund, we received $688,000 of revenue in September, which is up 5.7% for the year. Our 1% sales tax fund is broken down into three groups. The first is our 50% share, which is for street projects and infrastructure. Our second is the 20% share, which is for job creation and senior programs. This segment funds Stark Development, Elder Care, and RSVP, and the total expenses equal $681,000 at the end of September. Our third segment is the 30% share, which is set aside for capital improvements. Our expense here is $50,000, which is a portion of our final BAC pledge payment. In our 0.5% sales tax, we received $344,000 of revenue in September, which is also up 5.7% for the year. We are budgeting a $4 million transfer for the Public Works building construction in 2013. In our hospitality tax, we received $115,000 of revenue in September, which is down 6.5% over last year. Our expenses include $1 million for the final BAC pledge payment, $50,000 for the Stark County Veterans Memorial, and $37,000 for the environmental assessment at the airport. Our occupancy tax, we received $80,000 in September, which is down 28% over last year. Our expenses include $243,000 paid to the CVB for their subsidy, $60,000 for the special events grant, $5,000 to the Rough Rider Commission, and $17,000 for the downtown revitalization. Our street projects report, we received $265,000 in revenue, and we've expended $1.4 million towards those projects through September. And in our development impact fee program, this shows a balance of $110,000 at the end of September. We have $1.2 million in projects that are yet to be reimbursed and $3.3 million yet to be assessed. Those are some of the highlights of the financial statements. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Does anyone have questions or comments on the financial report? Not, Chair would entertain a motion to approve the report as presented.
I'll move we approve the report.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Oltman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll move to reports. Mr. Kessel?
Thank you. Sorry about that. The HR report will be provided by Ms. Nominuk.
Good evening, President Johnson, Commissioners. The HR report, as you see in front of you, street maintenance operator position has, as you know, has been a difficult position for us to fill. We had four full-time, one half-time positions, and we did just recently make 2 offers that were accepted, but lost another operator to another internal position. So we still have 3.5 openings there, and we are making some progress, I think, on that. So sanitation operator, we did have an opening in September, and that was filled. Sanitation supervisor position has been real difficult for us. It was a new position this year. We filled it for a couple months. That person left, went to work for someone else, and we've just had a real tough time. We'll be opening that again. We interviewed, and we're not able to make an offer, and we have that open again. We have 2 custodian positions. One is a new position for our Public Works facility, and the other was for our library/museum. Both of those have been filled. And police officer continues to be a difficult position for us to fill. We had it open in August, and in September, no hires have been made for either of those openings. And we have the position open again, and we'll be doing interviews the end of this month. Part-time library assistant was opened and filled. Library director, we're in the middle of the interviews for that position right now. We did 1 interview, and we have another the end of this month. The records clerk position was just opened. We will do interviews tomorrow on that. We have 1 opening there. And senior patrol officer, there was 1 internal opening for a senior patrol officer, and that just closed on Friday. So the interview process will start for that. And then we have a part-time deputy clerk of court position that was part-time position that was recently opened, and we are losing her and opening it again. So, any questions?
So what's your sense of the labor market? Is it getting tighter, or from your perspective,
You know,
about the same, or what?
It's really hard to say, we get some of these applicants in and it starts to look really promising, and then you get to the interviews and, they withdraw and just not as hopeful until you get that offer letter signed. This round for police officer, I don't know what happened, but we're getting several that are applying with experience. So we're really excited about that, but it's a ways to go until we interview. So I hate to comment on that because it just never turns out the way I want it to. So,
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Mr. Kessel, do you have any reports of your own that you'd like to give?
I do. Thank you for asking, President Johnson. I just wanted to thank the commission for allowing me to attend the ICMA conference. I just did return a couple weeks ago. I was able to attend. This is the premier conference for city managers, city administrator positions. There's about 3,000 people that generally do attend. So they do a phenomenal job of creating work sessions that are educational. I was able to attend some meetings on engaging citizens, leadership in challenging times, municipal contract management, and as you know, we have several contracts that we manage on a regular basis, mostly in the engineering side, staffing in environments that are difficult, and you just heard a report that we certainly have those difficulties in our hiring environment. So I just wanted to say thank you to the commission for allowing me to go, and for the staff that has to take up some of the slack in my absence. So it was a great conference, and I'm thankful to be able to attend that annually. That would conclude my report unless there's questions.
Why don't we also inform the commission that you and I did make an appointment to see the governor.
Oh, yes.
Which I think is Thursday of this, Wednesday or
23rd
Wednesday of this
Wednesday.
week.
at 2:30 at the Capitol.
Right. I knew where it was at and what time. I just wasn't sure of the day. I had the week right too. Mr. Kessel and I will go down and meet with the governor and some members of his staff and update the governor on our financial needs, the infrastructure projects that we're dealing with, and talk about financing. I don't know that there will be anything that will happen, say, in the current biennium, but we're already starting to look ahead to the next biennium. And so that he'll be well aware of Dickinson's needs and what we're facing.
And I should thank you, Mayor, for securing that appointment with the governor. And it's always nice when you have an audience to talk about exactly those things, because certainly from a financial perspective, City of Dickinson is changing and is in a much different position today than we were 2 years ago. And unfortunately, it's probably not in the positive direction.
Well, we're, speaking in financial terms, we're certainly leveraging up our balance sheet. And by the time we get through 2014 construction period, we'll be pretty well leveraged. And one of my real concerns is if you look forward and then like to the 2015 construction season, we won't really know what the legislature is going to do until towards the end of April of 2015. Well, by that time, you should have your projects all engineered and some of them bid, others about to bid. And right now, based upon the amount of money that we are committed to, spending on our current projects and ones that are in the engineering, I don't think we can really make a commitment beyond that, which means we probably wouldn't be doing anything in 2015 or anything of any substance. So that's one of the reasons we're down there early to after I outline this, because I don't think it'd be in the best interests of the state of North Dakota, the energy industry, if and our citizens here, if Dickinson had to pull back on its infrastructure development. So I know Sean and his staff are trying to verify what we think our construction expenses should be for 2015 and 2016. You know, the last number we had there was $128 million, and there's no way we can do that on our own. But at any rate, that's we were able to secure that appointment last week sometime, and we'll go down and spend an hour and a half with the governor. Unless, of course, you don't want us to. Any other reports or any other questions or comments that you might have for Mr. Kessel or any member of the staff? Okay. Well, we'll move into public safety then, and Chief Seebuck, you're up first.
President Johnson, Commissioners, tonight we'll present the third quarter report for the activities of the Dickinson City Fire Department. You see for the third quarter, the blue column for alert crew responses is down, 22 responses in the third quarter compared to 29 in the second quarter, the green column, 40 in the first quarter, the red column. The reason for that is because in the second quarter, we made a change to our response. We started to follow the model that's outlined more for a career department than for a volunteer department. If you remember in the first quarter and the second quarter, I brought reports to you talking about how we were using up our volunteers, how we were beating them into the ground. So we tried following a different model, and that is we direct full-time people, not that they didn't respond anyway, but we direct them more towards primary response during the day when the full-time staff is on duty, before we call out the alert crew, unless it's a confirmed fire situation. So although that alert crew decrease looks good in the third quarter, you have to look at that compared to the full-time response increase in the third quarter. So the call volume is still there, and unfortunately the calls are still increasing. It's just that we've shifted response strategies to adjust to some of the needs of our volunteers. General alarms, we've got 2 in the second quarter, 2 in the third quarter, 5 happened in the first quarter. First quarter was busy, even without the shift in response strategies. Night duty responses, we're seeing an increase in that. That's we have from 9:30 at night to 6:30 in the morning. We have 2 firefighters, whether it's full-time or volunteer, always at the fire department. That's exactly half of what's the recommended response of 4 firefighters. But we've had that in place for many, many years. What we're seeing is we're seeing a lot more incidents of calls for service from that 9:30 at night time frame to the 6:30 in the morning time frame. Through that overnight and early morning hours, there's more things going on, more things happening. Under the special call category, that may include something like our guys, our fire department turning out to support a fundraiser for muscular dystrophy, but under that also includes auto extrication, rescue, and special rescue type of things. Third quarter incident response, 132 total responses, compared to 2012's 102, 2011's 83. We're showing a 29% increase over 2012 and a 59% increase over 2011 in overall responses. Fire prevention and public education in the third quarter, we had 540 total activities broken down under the categories of 162 routine inspections, 170 follow-ups, 122 construction, 12 child care, 20 miscellaneous, which includes the fire suppression systems tests and alarm tests, fire drills, complaint investigations, etc., 9 lectures, tours, or demos, and 45 plan reviews. Quarterly fire prevention activities included a station tour from 2 different school groups, the High Five group and the Thumbs Up group on July 24th. Our staff gave fire safety lectures July 25th at Safety City. Fire safety lecture was conducted again by our staff for a condo association on the 6th. Again, a station tour on August 11th for the delayed adults group. Fire extinguisher demos were conducted for Evergreen staff, Ferguson, Jochum Museum, Mortensen staff at the new clinic location, Dickinson State University staff, and Country House. Under fire department activities, we were involved with the Relay for Life Strongman competition, as was the Dickinson Police Department. And we, of course, we beat them with the Battle for the Badges blood drive. We thought it would be wise to back off a little bit, and we let them win the Strongman competition. You may hear a different version of that. All I can say is that the representatives for the Dickinson Police Department that attended the Strongman competition weren't human. And that's all there is to that. Landing zone training with Spirit Life helicopter, August 1st. That took place out at our training site. We actually established a landing zone, and they did a couple touch and goes out there. National Night Out, we were invited to be a partner in that by the Dickinson Police Department. I think that turned out to be a very good community affair, August 8th. Sachs Motors held a fundraiser for the Dickinson Fire Department September 21st. Anyone that took a test drive in a new Chevy pickup on the 21st ended up donating to us, and Sachs Motors donated $20 to the fire department. I received a check today from Sachs Motors for $2,000. That's going to go towards the 25% local match we need to cover for a hydraulic rescue tool that we've ordered, the 75% of that being covered by a grant from Workforce Safety and Insurance. So that $2,000 will be spent on that rescue equipment. Southwest Regional Fire School, Oilfield Emergencies, was attended by 20 firefighters representing 6 different fire departments. And that was in October. Quarterly fire department training. Our regular training in July consisted of rope rescue, rapid intervention team training, and firefighting foam application. August, truck operations. When you see truck operations, that means our crews are working with their specific trucks, getting back to basics. September was self-contained breathing apparatus, forcible entry, and again truck operations. Special operations in the same time frame. July, we had a tour of the Sanford Clinic and practiced some rope work. August was an auto extrication training held jointly with the Dickinson Rural Fire Department. Again in August, Sanford Clinic, we had a setup practicing aerial rescue from a construction site. In September, high angle rope rescue, again, was with the ladder truck. We're in probation training right now. We've got 9 probationary firefighters that we're starting the training program with. Currently, we're at 37 volunteer firefighters and 6 full-time, for a total count of 43. And in conclusion, I'd like to thank Mortensen Construction and the Sanford Health people for allowing us to use their site and encouraging and supporting the training we conducted there with our Special Operations High Angle Rescue Team and our ladder truck, as you see in that picture. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chief. Any comments or questions for Chief Seebuck?
Thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll move into the Police Department and Chief Dossinger.
Good evening, Mr. President, members of the Commission. I have before you the 2013 third quarter report for the Dickinson Police Department. As Mrs. Nominack had mentioned, we are currently down 3 positions, sworn officer positions, and also one records clerk position that we are currently going through the hiring process for. I also have one officer that is serving a tour overseas, and one officer that's out for an extended leave for medical reasons. So for the third quarter, we have been working primarily with 5 officers down. Calls for service for the third quarter. You can see that we responded to 6,834 calls for service for the third quarter of 2013, compared to 6,245 calls for service for the same time frame last year. Year-to-date totals at the end of the third quarter, we have responded to 19,108 calls for service in 2013, compared to 19,239 calls for service in 2012. Very consistent numbers for the report compared to 2012. The one thing that we are seeing is the technical difficulty, or I'll call it the serious natures of the calls, has increased. We are responding to more weapon-related calls that involve, a heightened degree of officer safety issues. Accident numbers are fairly consistent to 2012. 250 accidents we responded to for the third quarter, compared to 260 last year. Total accident numbers for this year is 860 at the end of the third quarter, compared to 883 at the end of the third quarter for 2012. Traffic stops, third quarter, we conducted 2,071 traffic stops for the third quarter, compared to 1,920 traffic stops for the third quarter of 2012. Total traffic stops conducted for 2013 year-to-date is 5,960, compared to 5,606 last year. For 2013, at the end of the third quarter, there's a total of 4,212 citations issued and a total of 2,284 warnings issued. Criminal arrests for the third quarter, we made a total of 411 criminal arrests compared to 400 criminal arrests for the third quarter last year. Year-to-date, at the end of the third quarter, is 1,299 criminal arrests compared to 1,210 for last year. Our criminal investigative unit has worked a total of 182 cases for the third quarter. 93 of those cases are non-referable cases for charges. 67 of those involve walk-ins, and 25 of those are investigator-initiated. Our investigators were called out 8 times for the third quarter of 2013. They did conduct 6 criminal pre-employment and criminal polygraphs, conducted 54 background checks, and we're monitoring 39 sex offenders for the third quarter. There's also 1 internet crimes against children arrest made in the third quarter. There's a total of 79 truck regulatory stops conducted in the third quarter. That truck regulatory officer basically became more active right at the end of the second quarter, is when we've been able to put that individual in a full-time position. Our K-9 program, as you can see, they've been conducting a lot of training. K-9 Gambit and Nico, they were in the schools. They conducted 4 school searches for the third quarter. They did 11 public relation events. We're involved in 7 narcotic arrests and in 34 K-9 sniffs. They accompanied officers on 96 traffic stops. Our Southwest Tactical Team was called out 3 times in the third quarter of 2013, compared to 2 last year for the same time frame. As you can see, 38 officers attended 19 different trainings in the third quarter. September was a busy training month for us. Some of the types of training that they attended, of course, their K-9 training. We did have officers attend the 2-week portion of the Law Enforcement Training Academy Basic, emergency vehicle operation driving, advanced sniper schools, sexual assault training, field training officer training, and we also had 3 officers attend the North Dakota Peace Officers Association Convention, which is held in Minot this year. Some of the grants that we applied for and did we received a grant for $543,275. This grant is going to be used to purchase a simulcast radio system, a truck regulatory vehicle on 8 scales, 2 solar-powered speed signs, and an undercover mic used by our criminal investigative unit. The simulcast radio system is going to help cure a problem that we currently have when our officers are outside their vehicles and using their portable radios. There's dead space in which our officers can't communicate with their dispatch system. And that problem is because of the increase in our city limits. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Are there any comments or questions for the Chief?
maybe just one, Chief Dossinger. We look at some of these numbers, be it the accident numbers or the criminal numbers, whichever they may be, and they're increasing still. But if we were to go back, say, 5 years, has the curve flattened a lot? Has it,
If you go to a 5-year comparison, there definitely was a spike in increase. But as you can tell, the last 2 years, that has leveled off or plateaued. The numbers that we were seeing in 2013 and 2012 are still a lot greater than what we've seen in 2009, 2010.
but that surge seems to be flattened?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, do you know, have you had an update of when the signal lights will be put in on Empire and 9th?
That's a question that maybe Mr. Kubas could answer.
Mr. Kubas?
We don't have those on the schedule for next year, any new signals in town, but I know there's several locations where we are looking at traffic signals.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Chief Dossinger? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to the timetable agenda, and we have several public hearings scheduled, and these regard development impact fee projects. And Mr. Kubas, are you making any introductory remarks on these items?
Mr. President and Commission, I can if you'd like. We can give a brief introduction on each project as we want to hold these public hearings separately, I understand.
Well, maybe what we should do is we'll allow Mr. Colling to tell us give us a legal introduction, and then we'll have you make an introduction on each one, and I'll declare the public hearing open, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. President, Commissioners. The resolutions you have before you, the public hearings for tonight, are the final step in assessing development impact fees to particular lots that have developed within the city of Dickinson over the past several years. There are 8 specific projects that you're looking at tonight. These projects are in the main for roads and water and sewer that were installed in various subdivisions around the city. The process that the city follows is outlined in our city code. It is section 2.70 of our city code that deals with development impact fees. And the process is that these districts are set up at the outset before construction begins. The developer will come in and define a specific area of lots and blocks that the developer wishes to construct. And then the city has passed a resolution. You as a Board of Commissioners passed a resolution to create the district and a cap of how much money the city would put in to the particular development project. By ordinance, the city is capped out at $300,000 for a residential project and $600,000 for a commercial or an industrial project. Once the district is created, the developer goes forward and constructs the infrastructure, the roads, the streets, and the sewer and water, and then provides the city with evidence of the costs that were incurred in that project. And as those costs are documented by the developer, the city then reimburses those costs back to the developer up to the cap that is instituted by the resolution and by our code. Now that the projects have all been completed, the Special Assessment Commission has taken a look at these projects and given you recommendations of how the cost should be recovered from those lots that are benefited by these various development projects. There's a specific measure of how we determine which lots get which assessments, and that is defined in North Dakota Century Code, which states that any lots that are benefited by the particular development are able to be assessed for that particular development. So if a lot had sewer service or water service added to it, or if it had a street that was constructed adjacent to that lot, it is by definition a benefited property, and is eligible to have an assessment levied against it. One unusual portion of this program has to do with situations where a developer may not own all of the property that roads or water and sewer may be connected to. And in that situation, our city code states that if a developer contributes additional funds to the project that are not going to be assessed back to the lots, that the developer is eligible to have those costs credited back to the developer's portion of whatever the special assessment might be, or whatever the development impact fee may be. So in our practice and our past procedure on these projects, if a developer has less, or has some portion of their district that they do not own, the costs for the installation of the infrastructure that the developer may bear initially, but are not, the developer doesn't own the lot, is not a benefited lot, then the cost the developer has are credited back to the developer, and the developer's properties are not then assessed for those costs as they come in. So the recommendations from the from the Special Assessment Commission are before you in the spreadsheets that are attached to each resolution, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Mr. Colleen, what resolution number are we starting with here?
Mr. President, we'll start with Resolution 38-2013.
And then do they just go consecutively?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Colleen?
I have one, and maybe you said it and I missed it. On these eight projects that we're looking at tonight, what is our charge? What options do we have? Is it simply yay or nay? Can you summarize that for us?
Certainly, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioners, your discretion here is basically plenary. You can adjust those amounts to each lot as you deem fit. The city has already, in a sense, advanced all of the funds for these projects, so that money is out there. It now has to be collected through special assessments. So you will want to assess the entire amount that the city has contributed to each project, but how you balance that within each project, or how you adjust numbers in that, is at your discretion. You have the ability to determine which lots you feel are benefited and in which amounts.
The method that the city staff chose to allocate the special assessment, is that consistent with our prior practices?
It is, Mr. President, Commissioners. The method that city staff have used, and Mr. Kubis can take you through that, is basically to take the acreage of those lots, the square footage of those lots, and distribute the costs pursuant to the square footage of each lot that is a benefited property within that district. That is the way that the city has assessed those lots and assessed those development impact fees in the past.
Other questions for Mr. Coley? Well, Mr. Kubis, if you want to make some introductory remarks in general, feel free to do that. And if you do that, when you're done with that, then we'll start with the first one here. If you want to say anything specifically about that, then we'll open the public hearing. And by the way, this is Mr. Kubis's first meeting as our new city engineer representing KLJ. I think it's your first meeting, isn't it?
It is.
Yes. So welcome, and good luck tonight.
I'm glad so many people came out to see my first meeting. So, in general, just to reiterate what Mr. Colling said, in general, the assessment method we did use was by the square foot or by the acreage, due in large part to the fact that a lot of the subdivisions and the impact fee projects that were before us had varying different lot sizes. On the first one we'll look at, we have lot sizes that range from 100,000 to 1 million square feet. So to do a per each didn't seem to be a very fair method of distribution. So we did go by the square footage in most cases. Again, I'll give a brief outline of the projects that each resolution will have its own project. and can give you any background information on some of the action that the Assessment Commission may have taken. So if we're ready, we can jump into the first project.
Okay, go ahead if you have some comments on the first project.
Yeah, the first project is Porter Second Subdivision, Phase 1, and this constructed the water and sewer in 29th Street West, and that's the street just south of Baker Hughes. And it also installed water and sewer in Sim Street between 26th and 29th, and 4th Avenue East between 26th and 29th. And it constructed a portion of Sim Street between 26th and 29th Street. Again, we did the square foot method of assessment, and during the Special Assessment Commission's meeting, they had opted to take out several of the lots just to the south of 29th Street West that were owned by the developer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. At this time, we'll declare the public hearing open regarding this subdivision. Anyone that wishes to comment may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Kevin Brown. I'm representing Brown Properties. Just a little background. I did speak in front of the Assessment Committee as well in protests of what we were being assessed on our property. I don't have the map with me. I assume you all probably have the assessment district in front of you. When I spoke to the Commission, we're kind of the odd guys out, being the only developed property there since 2006. My comments were that I didn't think we should bear the same assessment as all the new development out there. We don't access any services from Sims. Ours all come from 26th Street, which we've had for 6 or 7 years now. On the day of the assessment committee meeting, the developer asked to be excluded from the assessment district, and they were voted to be excluded. I made the same request and lost on a tie vote 2-2. I guess today I'm just here to ask that this be revisited. If nothing else, if we could put it off for a couple of weeks. It's hard to get information on everything that's going on. Commissioner Altmans has been helpful, but we haven't been able to connect and get all our information together. But I guess I would just ask that this be revisited on our property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
I have a general question, Craig. You said that this first one that we're looking at, Porter's Second Subdivision, Phase 1, included water, sewer, and street?
Yes, that was my understanding. I wasn't involved in the
Right.
compilation of the district, but it involved all the water, sewer, and then the street that would have been half of Sim Street that borders the property in question by Mr. Brown.
Okay, because then the one that we'll visit after this, just to give a precursor, does that one also include water and street, or just street on the second phase?
So Phase 2 of Porter Second includes the remainder of all the streets, which would be 29th Street, 4th Avenue East, and the north half of Sim Street.
Okay, all right. Just a general comment that I have, you know, as we go, well,
Just excuse me, Commissioner. Should we see if there's anybody else in the audience that wants to comment on this? And then if not, you go ahead.
Any way you want to.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to comment on this Porter's Second Subdivision, Phase 1? Anybody else? Okay. Excuse me for interrupting you, but go ahead.
You know, we have 8 of these to go through, and, you know, as we try to be consistent, the one thing that I do see as we look further down the road is that other subsequent developments have, across the board, assessed all the lots that are coming online. When you look at Cook Meadows, when you look at Painted Canyons, they went through and assessed the specials on each of the properties, all of the properties involved. When you look back at Porter's Second Subdivision Phase 1, with the developer excluding themselves from participating in the specials, they've essentially passed the cost on to 4 property holders. And they also did it in 2 phases, which means that they'll be requesting $600,000 twice. So $1.2 million on a $2.7 million project. So they get, double assistance from the city in putting the development in, which seems generous to begin with, and then excludes their property, so the properties that they're selling won't have any specials, which makes their lots more appealing. And on this first one, they passed it off to the 4 remaining properties that were in the neighborhood. I guess a test that I would do for myself to see if this was fair or not is, for many years, pick for instance, the Braun property was the only property up there. If Baker Hughes had not come online and the other 2, would we assess $600,000 to one property because that is the only odd man out? It would seem that if you were going to do the specials on this project, that you would spread it out among all the properties that benefit. I haven't had any one of the properties up there say that they didn't feel like they should have some participation in the expenses. They all agree that having the streets and having the neighborhood fill in is a good thing. I just don't know how at the special assessment meeting a developer could double dip and then ask to be excluded. It almost feels like triple dipping at that point, when you exclude yourself from being in the specials. And the specials are, an incentive or a bonus for doing the development. We're doing away with the program, which means that we feel pretty comfortable in the fact that if you are in this area doing business, you should be able to pencil it out without any incentives from the city and still make it work too. I just don't understand how the developer excludes themselves from participating in the program.
Who's the developer? Mr. Kubis?
The developer is an LLC called Quad Pro.
Quad Pro?
Yeah, we retain which engineering firm to do the calculations of the special assessment.
KLJ did the calculations.
Yeah, but Mr. Kubis, you didn't participate in doing this when KLJ did the allocations here?
No, I was involved.
Oh, you were involved?
Yep.
Okay, good. Between you and Mr. Colling, can you address Commissioner Altman's question about why the developer could opt out with some lots here? What the logic would be in this case?
I think Mr. Colling might have touched on it in his introduction about the developer having the ability to pay money up front, and the project cost being $2.7 million. More than half of the total project cost was borne by the developer, and so those $1.5 million in rough numbers paid up front were in essence their special assessment, and that they paid up front, and the remaining $1.2 million of the impact fee dollars is assessed to the remaining property owners. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
I guess what strikes me is that they're able to exclude themselves from participating in the specials, but they get full participation in the benefit of selling their lots at the cost of having their neighbors help substantially put in the infrastructure. I would say that if you were going to exclude yourself from participating in the specials, and you could have specialed up to $600,000, but you exclude almost 65% of the benefactors from this, then you would expect to get something less than the 600. You can get up to 600,000, but if you are taking yourself out of that special assessment district, you can't pass the full $600,000 onto the 4 remaining properties. You would do the math for that whole subdivision to come up with your cost per square foot, linear foot, I don't care how you do that. You would assess it across the board. If a major portion decides not to participate in that, and that is the developer and that is their choice, you can't pass the 600,000 back on to the 4 neighbors. You would only expect to get somewhere less than that.
Mr. President, Commissioner Olson, I think philosophically the concept is that if say 29th Street was constructed as a traditional special assessment district, then the properties on the north side of that special assessment district would pay half the cost, and the properties on the south side would pay half the cost. In this situation, the total cost of the improvements was about $2.7 million, and the developer essentially forwarded that money in its entirety. The developer was reimbursed then $1.2 million, and those costs, the reimbursed costs, go to the properties that the developer then does not own. So the developer essentially takes care of its portion of the costs up front that are not specialed to anyone. We don't special assess the developer's properties for that because they paid for their portion of that up front. They paid from the beginning, and it's the properties that are not owned by the developer then that bear the cost of what the city reimburses, the $1.2 million that the city reimburses.
Sure, but in this scenario with Phase 1 and Phase 2, if you just do the simple math for Baker Hughes, they're on the hook for $920,000 of the $1.2 million. They're really on the hook for a third of this entire development. And that's not even considering, they are also getting special assessed for North Industries. I guess I'd be interested in, was it the North Industries Special District that allowed Baker Hughes their water, sewer, and access, or was it the Porter's subdivision? Which one brought them online for them to be able to do business?
I believe their access, I know their access is off of 34th Street in the North Industries subdivision. And then water and sewer surrounds their property. And I'd have to look. I think their water and sewer comes off of 34th Street as well, just because it was in First. I would have to double check that though on the city map.
Sure. So then if you look at that, if you're looking further down the road, they were assessed roughly $200,000 for the street that allowed them access and brought them water and sewer, which would seem fair. They get to pay almost $1 million to have a street run south of them that wasn't their point of access and wasn't the water and sewer that brought them online. So they're getting full participation in a project south of them, which really truly benefits the lots that the developer brought online.
You've taken items 1 and 2, and you're talking about them
I'm
both.
talking about 1, 2, and I'm just looking at the big picture.
Right, but you're talking about 1 and 2 together. And if I understand this right, in Phase 1, the city has invested $600,000, and in Phase 2, the city also invested $600,000. So between these two phases, the city has to special assess $1.2 million against these properties. Now, in Phase 1, you said the developer has excluded 4 properties?
No, the developer is only charging 4 properties, the 4 existing properties that were already there. Baker Hughes.
Okay, the developer has excluded how many lots?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of his own lots.
It's excluded 9 lots.
If I can clarify, there's 4 owners, but there's more than 4 lots. I think there's 7 lots that are being special, but they only have 4 owners. I believe that to be accurate. Just a simple clarification. We keep referring to four lots and
4 owners.
4 owners, 7 lots.
7 lots,
Yes.
okay. Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused on, you know, if you're looking at the entire development, how you, in a sense, can allocate the city's money versus the developer's money. I would have thought that, you know, whatever the city agreed to contribute is in effect a loan to the project that the developer doesn't have to pay back. It's paid back through whoever buys the properties from the developer or that are in that block. And I guess, you know, I guess you'd have to explain again to me how they can kind of pick and choose what stays in kind of the special assessment pool and what doesn't, and why that's reasonable and fair. And I think I heard you say, Mr. Coling, at the very start that that's per the Century Code?
Mr. President, it's per city code.
Per city code.
And the section is 2.70.080. It states if a developer has made payments for improvements for which the impact fee is assessed to property not owned by the developer may, at the discretion of the Special Assessment Commission, receive a credit for the amount of such payments. So in this whole district, if we take phases 1 and 2 together, it was a $2.7 million improvement. And the developer essentially invested $1.5 million into that improvement, and the city invested $1.2 million. That property, or that improvement, benefited more properties than just what was owned by the developer. Since the developer in sum has contributed more than 50% of the cost of that total development, I think it was the judgment of the Special Assessment Commission that they had essentially paid their costs. Their costs were loaded into the properties that they were then going to sell or own. So the remainder of that cost then would be spread to the other benefited properties. Again, if we would do this as a traditional special assessment district, the assessments to those properties that are not owned by the developer here would actually be more than what they are under the Development Impact Fee program. Because the developer in this situation owned, I believe it's a little less than 50% of all of the lots, of all the property. So in that case, those benefited properties would be paying for more than 50% of the total cost of the improvement. Here under this scenario, they're paying for $1.2 million of a $2.7 million project.
So in a sense, what you're saying is if we'd used another method, we would have assessed $2.7 million against the whole block of land, whether it was in the original development or just the benefited. And if we can use Mr. Brown as an example, are you saying that if we would have looked at it as a total block, his assessment number would have been higher than the one he gave us now?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Mr. Kubis ran those calculations. I'm not sure if you have those available with you now, but he did run those calculations to determine what the potential impact could have been. Do you have those available, Mr. Kubis?
I don't have them in front of me right now. And it's kind of hard to break out because it was water and sewer in phase 1 plus a little bit of streets that went into phase 1. And so it wasn't a clear-cut project. But putting everything in total, the 2.7 assessed against all the properties in the Kilwine 5th subdivision, the North Industry subdivision, and the Porter 2nd subdivision, if you would assess that out, same methodology using the square footage, the developer-owned properties would have had a bit smaller assessment than what the $1.5 million that they paid in total, and the non-developer-owned properties would have been a little bit more.
It's still not a correct way to do it, because in phase 1, if you were going to do that with water, sewer, and streets, we already know that Baker Hughes paid for their water, sewer, and street in the third one that we're going to do tonight. We already know that Braun already had their water, sewer, and street. So you couldn't go back and assess $2.7 million to the entire property and make Braun and Baker Hughes pay for water and sewer and streets. You could look at the street costs. You could simply look at the street costs for that. I guess where this gets clouded for me is that phase one includes water, street, sewer, and the properties that two of the properties I know, three of them actually, three of the property owners already had their water, sewer, and access. That'd be a tough pill to swallow to say that you're benefiting them if you did the whole district when they already had those services prior to this coming on board. Like I said, the bigger issue for me is that, for one thing, you know, the developer played the game of, I'm going to do it in 2 phases so I can double dip. So on a $2.7 million project, I'm going to get back $1.2 million from the city, which bugs me anyways, but that's a sidebar. But then to exclude yourself from the specials and have your neighbors shoulder the whole responsibility for that. When you look at any of the others that we're going to look at tonight, Painted Canyon or any of the others, they assessed their entire property. Cook Metals assessed every lot that they brought on, whether they owned them or they were already sold or they were selling them to another developer. Seems unfair that you would exclude yourself. Like you said, Mayor, I understood the program to be too, that it was a way for the developer to recoup some of the money. We would physically write out 2 checks for $600,000, $1.2 million back to the developer, and then essentially we would take on the risk of getting that loan money back by specialing it out over the project to each of the properties that were involved. And then as that developer sold the lots that he still owned, they would be sold with specials, and the new property owners would be responsible for paying back those specials. So it's a way for us to upfront the money back to the developer. We take the risk of getting those specials paid back. But what a sweetheart deal if you can get half of your development money back and then sell your properties without any special. Those are very appealing properties. You can ask a much better price on that property when you're comparing it to another lot that does have specials. So great deal for the developer, bad deal for the 4 property owners that were next to them.
Mr. President, if I may, I think it would, it may not state things correctly to say that the developer here is putting the whole cost of the development on these 7 lots. In fact, if it's a $2.7 million project and we're specialing back $1.2 million, the developer is actually picking up about 55% of the cost of the development. And that $1.5 million that the developer has in to the project, that's going to be a loaded cost in what they sell their properties for. That $1.5 million is a sunk cost, and they're going to have to either bear that cost or recoup it back in the sale price, the purchase price of those
right,
lots.
like any other developer that doesn't get the benefit of using the impact fee, like any developer moving forward from this point that's looking at bringing on a subdivision without any of these incentives, they will have to look at the cost of doing business and price their lots appropriately. This seems, again, when you let somebody double dip and then exclude themselves from it, seems like a phenomenal deal.
Oh.
I'm not in realty, though. What do you think, Shirley? When you look at this?
Well, the only one I ever worked on, I was on the commission, Special Assessment Commission for 9 years, and I'm glad we're done with it. It's gone. Because I don't think there's a fair way for anybody, really. I mean, if you're going to develop it, you should pay for it. Now that we don't have them, yes, the costs of lots have gone up, and it affects the consumer no matter how you do it, whether you have specials or your lots are priced higher to begin with. But with Painted Canyon, it was figured by square foot. So if you bought a smaller lot, you paid less specials, and if you bought a bigger lot, you paid more specials.
But
That's
every
all.
lot was included, right?
Absolutely, every single one.
So none of the Painted Canyon properties got to exclude themselves. So the developer didn't come to the city.
No.
They did double and triple dip, but they didn't then say, okay, but we'd like to exclude ourselves from the specials so that we can sell our properties without specials. And we'll only push the cost onto the existing lots that have been around our subdivision.
No, and the person that picks them up is a consumer at the end anyway, because we do let them pay for 10 years, which is a cost to the city, but we do charge 6% interest, right?
On commercial lots, it's 5 years.
5 years on commercial.
5 years on
yeah.
commercial. Well, these were residential, though.
So what's your gut feeling, Ms. Dukehart, when you look at a developer excluding themselves from the specials? Am I wrong on this, or?
Well, has he developed everything already, or is this just the completion part? Because normally we don't put specials on unless it's done. So, I'm sorry, but I guess I should have followed more on this. Is everything developed there, or is this just the part that he's developed?
This is everything, water, sewer, streets, curb, gutter.
But all of his properties developed?
Mhm, yeah.
Do all the properties now have water and sewer, streets to them?
For this development impact fee district, it's my understanding, yes, all the lots are serviced
For
with water and
both
sewer and
Phase
streets.
1 and Phase 2?
Correct. There are a couple of lots within the North Industries Development Impact Fee District that don't have utility service at this point, but those are the only two lots, to the best of my knowledge, that don't.
Then in my opinion, then they should be split all the way across the board, because it is money that the city has borrowed them.
Okay. Mr. Colling, say that there's 2 lots that don't have water,
And that's for a different district, though.
that's not for in 1 and 2 here?
Correct.
Okay, that's, okay.
Mr. President.
For correction, if we go back and assess them all by the square footages, it's what they said, the Brown could go up, well, will go up.
No?
No.
Not necessarily. If you look at 1 and 2 together, here's my understanding, and correct me now if I'm wrong, but if we look at 1 and 2 together, we have $1.2 million to special assess. If we include all the lots, including the developer-owned lots, it would be done on a per square foot basis. That 1.2 million, it'd be $1.2 million that would be assessed back, not the total development cost. And in that scenario, Mr. Brown's assessment would likely go down.
And it's not just Mr. Brown's.
No, but I mean,
We're looking
that-
at 3
that's
other
the
ones
only
here
one
that,
Yeah.
3 others, and none of them have told me that they didn't feel like they didn't receive a benefit and that they shouldn't have some costs. I've never had one of them come up and say, boy, this doesn't seem fair at all. But they do believe that excluding yourself and then passing it off to the 4 remainders seems highly unfair.
So to move this on, can we table this one and ask for the square footage
Well,
projections for the next meeting?
we can table. What I would suggest we do is table it till we get through the other 8,
Yeah.
and then come back to it, and we may decide to table longer. But if we tabled beyond this meeting, are we going to run the risk that we're going to be too late getting into the county, and so we're not going to collect this?
Yeah, Mr. President, we're obligated to certify special assessments to the county by November 1st. So if you would table it, it would be then at least a year before that special assessment will go into collection,
Unless we have to act prior to.
unless you acted in a special
Okay.
meeting prior to the 1st.
I really struggle with the November date line because in the essence of doing what I feel would be right, we're gonna harm some of the businesses and not doing what I would feel is fair. You know, so
Well, like I said, I think if we came back to this.
Otherwise, we've got other things on the agenda that people want to get to too, but I would suggest we just table this until we complete item 8 here. And we'll come back and talk about it. Would there be a motion to that effect?
So move.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? Mr. Jackson, you started to say something and got, did you want to say something before?
I can hold it.
Okay. Any discussion then on this motion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries, so this is tabled until we complete item 8. So item 2 is the Porter Second subdivision. Mr. Kubas, anything that you'd like to say about that before we open the public input part?
Mr. President, it's essentially the same district as the Phase 1. It was just involving street construction on 29th Street, 4th Avenue East, and the north half of that one block of Sim Street.
Okay, are there any developer properties excluded here in this one?
The same developer properties were excluded in Phase 2 as they were in Phase 1, and essentially it's all the property in the Porter Second subdivision, the property bordering and immediately south of 29th Street West.
Okay. All right, thank you. We'll open the public hearing then. Anyone that wishes to comment regarding the Porter Second Subdivision Phase 2 may do so now. Just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Anybody for this one? Not? Well, I'll declare the public hearing closed. I'd like to suggest that we table this one and act on this one after number 1, which
Mr. President, I move we
We'll-
table this.
I'll
Thank you.
second that.
we'll deal with these two kind of together. So, any other discussion on the motion to table? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, the motion carries. We'll go to item 3, the Keithley and East Dale, 22nd Avenue East. And any introductory remarks, Mr. Kubas?
Mr. President, essentially the same type of project on a much smaller scale as water, sewer, and streets on 22nd Avenue East. This is south of the East Business Loop. This project went through Special Assessment Commission without any changes or modifications to the property. Subsequent to that meeting, I've had a meeting with the proponent of the project or the developer, and a similar issue, stating that, you know, he had paid for the entire project cost, in rough numbers, $150,000. And the intent of the project, following past practices, was that the $75,000 that the city has into the project through impact fees would be assessed to the property owners, those property owners being on the east side of the street. He, at the time, he and another individual owned the properties on the west side of 22nd Avenue East.
We'll declare the public hearing open then for the Keithley and East Dale district or development. If there's anyone here that would like to comment, you may do so now. State your name.
I'm Dennis Miller. I was the developer of the property on the west side. Me, along with Ray Warner, developed it. And at the time when we started this project, talked to Sean Soren, and he informed us that we had to pay 50% up front, and then the remainder 50%, or 51% it was, up front. The remainder would be special assessed about against the other property owners. So then we paid that up front, and here, about a month ago or so, I got a bill for like $22,518 for my share of the project that I was told would be special assessed against the other people. And the reason I was gone, I couldn't attend the special assessment meeting. That's when I talked to Craig Kubas about if there anything we can do about it. So I just feel, well, I already paid my quarter of that of the project plus. So the people on the other side of the street that are gaining use of the street should be accessed for the rest of it.
Okay.
So clarification, the other side of the street you're saying is not being assessed?
Well, it is, but I'm still getting assessed another quarter of it,
Okay.
of the impact fees back.
But you're part of the developers in this.
Yes, I am the developer.
So you're essentially asking us for opposite of what we just went through here? You're asking to be excluded as,
Well, I just feel I paid $80-some thousand on the project already. So should I have to pay another $22,000 when we originally paid, me and Ray Warner, the west side of the street paid for that, over half the project. And, you know, and I always wondered why that street wasn't developed when the other property owner built the building quite a few years ago. That street wasn't developed past his property, it was just brought to the front of his building, and that was it. So he's got by without not building that street for many years to start with.
So which lots were yours, Mr. Miller?
I was half of lot 3 and 4. Then Ray Warner owned half of lot 3 and 2, and in between building and stuff, he sold it to Northwest Tire.
So, Mr. Colling, in a sense, we do have the opposite issue here than what we had in the,
That's correct, Mr. President. This is
That,
the opposite side of the coin. And it's, as the gentleman said, he was not at the Special Assessment Commission meeting. I believe that may have been why this assessment was not altered at that time. If the Special Assessment Commission was consistent, I think that assessment would have been adjusted by the Special Assessment Commission as well. And the developer lots would have been excluded, and that assessment transferred to those other lots that were benefited but not owned by the developer.
okay. Mr. Miller, do you have anything else you'd like to tell us?
No.
Okay,
Not there, so.
thank you, and we'll see, is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to this issue? Okay. Comments by commissioners?
So in other words, this happened because we as a city weren't aware of the situation when it went to the Assessment Commission. Is that what I'm understanding? We weren't aware of the payment by Mr. Miller?
As we, KLJ, were hired to do this, these agreements weren't written down. I think it had just been past practice that the proponent of the project, in this case Mr. Miller, had to pay for the entire street. There was no point in paving half the street, so he paid for his half of the street and for the other half of the street, was reimbursed with impact fees with the expressed intent that the impact fees would be assessed wholly to the other side of the street in this case. This is the same issue as Porter Second, but probably on a simplified version. So.
I think it's going to be really difficult for us as commissioners to kind of pick and choose methods.
I think it has to be consistent.
It has to be a consistent method. And that may not always produce a fair result on each individual property. But I kind of think we have to be consistent on our methods now. As Mr. Kubis said, this is a more simplified development, and it seems to me Mr. Miller has a point here that, you know, he paid for his part of the street, he and his partner, those that live on the other side now should pay for the other part. The way this is currently calculated, he has paid for his half, plus he is now being assessed a portion for the other half. That doesn't seem right either.
A couple of points. I absolutely agree, and I think Mr. Miller makes an absolutely logical point. I think we anticipated these situations conceptually, not knowing the arithmetic and some of the detail. We anticipated these kinds of situations when we did many of these impact improvement districts. The second thing I would say is when we reach for fairness, we're probably still going to have imperfection. We're not going to get this right to perfection. But this seems like an obvious situation to me.
So my question would be, if we make a change on this, and I'm inclined to vote for the change, does that get done in time for our November deadline?
Commissioner Steiner, all the numbers are included within the spreadsheet that Mr. Kubas has, and it's just a matter of changing the information in the spreadsheet.
And Mr. Colling, we do have the ability to lower and raise.
That's correct. Commissioner Jackson, you have the ability to alter these amounts or change them as you deem fit.
You know, the compelling difference here, though, is on this project and this street, it directly improved the properties right across the street from it. They will receive a direct impact from it. In the one that we were talking about before, the streets that were going in were to the new development, and then they are assessing to the neighbors that had already had their access and their streets and their water and sewer. You know, there is a subtle difference between the way this is being presented and as far as how they benefit from it.
You know, I hope we can address that more when we get back
Sure.
to the others, but I don't necessarily agree with that. I think there is benefit.
Well, Mr. Colling, what I'm hearing is that the commission, or at least there sounds like at least three of us, would agree that Mr. Miller shouldn't be assessed here, and those dollars should go against the remaining properties. So if we want to act on this, what would the motion be to make that change?
Mr. President, I believe your motion would be to confirm the special assessment district, provided that Lot 4, Block 1 be excluded from assessment, and that its assessment be redistributed to the remaining lots in the special assessment district, or in the development impact fee district, rather.
One quick comment. That's Lot 4 and half of Lot 3. According to something must be registered correctly, because I own half of Lot 3. And I've got the deeds to prove it if need be. Somehow that got missed when they sent out their initial special assessment, and then they were informed of it, so they divided them up. So I own half of Lot 3 and Lot 4, and the other one is separate. So.
Mr. Cruz can perhaps address this. I believe the information on the spreadsheets was pulled from the assessor's office. So those are the lots that receive the tax assessment, or that receive the tax bill. And we don't have the ability to assess a development impact fee to one half of a lot and not to another, unless that is divided through our lot split procedure. That's the way the tax assessments will go out.
So Mr. Miller would have to work that out with his partner.
Correct. And my understanding is that when the the tax assessment goes to the county, it's assessed against that particular property identification number. And then when the lot is split, if it is split, then the assessor's office takes care of the process of dividing that tax bill and the special assessment between those two properties once they are split.
Okay, going back to Mr. Colling's suggested motion, is that a motion that is actually amending Resolution 40? Or is that a separate motion and then we do something else to get through this?
The resolution incorporates the spreadsheet by reference. These spreadsheets will actually be included in our official resolution book. So if you want to approve Resolution 40-2013 as amended, you may do that.
But we would pass this suggested motion first.
Well, you could do it on one motion.
On one motion, okay, so that is the amendment.
Correct.
So we'd have a motion to amend the resolution,
Mr.
and
President,
then we'd have a motion to approve the amended resolution.
You can do it that way as well. It only takes one motion to
Okay.
have the adoption of
The attorney.
district.
Mr. Steiner?
if the clerk has the amendment correct, I would move we approve resolution number 40 as amended.
Second.
Okay. I'm not clear, Mr. Colling, that the motion and the amendment, or the motion and the second actually accomplishes what you were trying to explain to me.
If I understand,
Because he moved to approve the resolution as amended, and we haven't amended it. That's where I'm hung up.
if the motion includes the matters that I stated to exclude Lot 3, or I'm sorry, Lot 4, Block 1, and have its assessment distributed to the remaining properties in the district, that can be included in the motion and passed with one vote.
Was that included in your motion?
Ms. Binstock, is that what you have? That's included in my motion.
That's your intent. Okay. And that's your intent to second that motion, Mr.
Correct.
Stuckert?
It's my intent.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay, any discussion now? Further discussion? All right, we'll proceed to vote on this one. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We'll go to number 4, Cook Meadow Hills, first edition. Mr. Kubas, anything you want to say on this one?
Yes, Mr. President, the Cook Meadow Hills First Edition, Phase 1 and 2, involved water and sewer and streets on residential properties within the Cook Meadow Hills subdivision. This one, differing from the others, like Commissioner Oltmans had stated before, is entirely owned or was entirely owned by the developer at the time of the impact fee creation and the district's creation. So all properties that were benefited are being assessed in this case.
Thank you, Mr. Kubas. We'll open the public hearing on Cook Meadow Hills First Edition, Phases 1 and 2. If there's anyone that would like to comment, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody wish to comment? There's no one that wishes to comment, so we'll close the public input section. This is Resolution 41. Are there any comments by city staff or city commissioners? Not, is there a motion regarding Resolution 41-2013?
I'll make a motion to approve
Second.
Resolution 41.
And we have the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. That brings us to item 5, which is also Cook Meadow Hills, but this is second and fourth editions. Mr. Kubas, any remarks?
No, really, a similar assessment district to the previous project in Cook Meadow Hills. Water, sewer, streets, again, property all owned at the time by the developer.
Okay. We'll declare the public hearing open for Cook Middle Hills, second and fourth edition. If you would like to comment on this, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There is no one that wishes to comment. We'll declare the public hearing closed. And this is Resolution 42. Would there be a motion regarding 42?
I'll move that we approve 42, 2013.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion?
Just one question. I heard Mr. Kubis say, at the time, all the lots were owned by the developer. At what time?
At the time that the district was created by resolution. Now, of course, there's houses up there owned by multiple property owners. My understanding is that the assessment will still go to the properties that were included in the district, regardless of ownership.
When you look at the detailing for both of these, not only was it spread out among all the lots affected, but there's still lots on here that are owned by Cook Property Investments, but there's also properties on here owned by Meyer Contracting, other developers, individual homeowners. So Cook didn't go back and then exclude him or his properties. It was assessed across the entire property, whether he owned the lots or another developer. So, this one seems very fair, very equitable.
Except Commissioner Altman's, he didn't tell the people that bought that there were going to be specials. So we do have an issue, not as a city, but
Sure.
Other discussion? Did we do a motion on this one? We did.
We did.
Okay. So any other discussion? Hearing none, then we'll vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. We're at item 6, North Industries. Mr. Kubis, anything you want to say there?
North Industries was an industrial development in the north part of town, the land that now houses Baker Hughes and Halliburton and others. The project in its whole was several phases, but it involved water, sewer, and streets on 34th Street West, 1st Avenue East, 2nd Avenue East, and 4th Avenue East. The map that you have in front of you with the packet did have one property that was excluded by the Special Assessment Commission, and that, two properties. I think it's Lot 1 and Lot 2 of Block 1, the very northwest corner of the subdivision. Those properties did not receive benefit. There is no water, sewer, and street right now on 40th Street West, so that property was exempted.
They will likely pay costs for water and sewer and streets when 40th is developed and water and sewer put in there.
That's my understanding. The city right now is developing a water, sewer, and street project for 40th Street that could be assessed back to all the benefiting properties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubis. We'll declare the public hearing open regarding North Industries. If there's anyone that wishes to comment, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. Anybody for North Industries? Nope, we'll declare the public hearing closed. And this is Resolution 43-2013. Is there a motion regarding this resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 43, 2013.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Further discussion?
I'll just add, as we go through this one to go to the next one, if you look on this one, this is where Baker Hughes pays their assessment fees for their water, sewer, and street. This is where they get assessed $180,000. This is a true impact on that property. This is the development that brought them online and connected them to the city and made their property possible. Same thing with Halliburton. So all of these properties, this seems like a true and natural assessment because it is actually the benefit that they received to bring their properties online. So it's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Holman. Any other comments? No other comments? We'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Holman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. We go to number 7, the Painted Canyon Estates. Mr. Kubas?
The Painted Canyon Estates project was, again, water, sewer, and streets. This is on the east side of the Painted Canyon subdivision, the estate lots, the larger lots. The properties being assessed were at the time all owned by, I believe, Winchester Homes. Some of those lots, again, have been sold, similar to the Cook Meadow Hills project. The one issue that came up in the Special Assessment Commission meeting, similar to what Mr. Miller had said earlier, was that these lots have now been split as there are twin homes or duplexes on the lots. The assessment, as it was sent out, the letters that were sent out to the property owners, were sent out per the information that was available on the assessor's site. So if those lot splits have been recorded, I guess the assessor will split the assessment then.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. Any other comments? Do we have a motion regarding, this is Resolution 44.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, then we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Ullman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Number 8 is Saks First Subdivision. Mr. Kubas?
The Saks Motors project involves the construction, water, sewer, and streets again in 20th Street, which is the street just south of the new Saks Motor dealership. The property is affected, obviously the Saks Motors property, and some of the lots in the Diamond Acres subdivision, and a couple lots in the Saks Motors subdivision south of 20th Street.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kubas. We'll declare the public hearing open on the Saks First Subdivision. If you'd like to comment, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments. There's no one that wishes to comment. We'll declare the public hearing closed. This is Resolution 45-2013. Any comments by commissioners or any motions?
Mr. President, if I may, this is the one special assessment district or development impact fee district that is not strictly assessed on a per square foot basis, pursuant to an agreement by the affected property owners. Excuse me, the large lot that contains the Saks Motor dealership will bear 75% of the assessment, and that is pursuant to an agreement that the property owners themselves entered into and presented to the city.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Colling.
The other clarification I'd like to get, seeing that the assessment is less than the 300,000, I assume that this is the total project cost for that work up there, that 222,000.
I believe the 221,000 is just half of the bills that were submitted to the city as evidence of the payment of the project.
I think our policy was 50% of the costs up to $300,000 per phase,
Okay.
or 50%
Yeah.
up to 600,000, excuse me.
Okay.
but, yeah. Any other comments? Do we have a motion regarding
No, I'll move we
Okay.
approve. Is this
I'll second
40, 45, 46?
45? Yeah.
Second?
So we have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Okay, we're going to go back to the two that we tabled. I would like to get these done by November 1st. You know, it's when you look at these two, it's $1.2 million that the citizens of Dickinson have upfronted. You know, it's time to have these special assessed and start in the process of getting this repaid back. So if we want to do something different here, I'm okay with doing something different. But I think we should make a commitment to come back then and have another meeting and act on this prior to November 1st, unless Mr. Colling has some other alternatives for us.
Well, Mr. President, I'm fine with that process. One thing you may want to keep in mind is it does take some time to get the information over to the county so that it can be put on the assessment rolls. I think the latest that we would want to be able to get our information to the county would probably be the 28th, next Monday. I think that would probably be enough time for the county to input it into their system. But I wouldn't want to put too much stress up against the November 1st deadline.
Well, I guess my concern is if, you know, I think this one is complex enough, at least it's complex enough for me, that I'd kind of like to see the two presentations. And I mean, if we're going to be asked to pick which way to do this, which is most fair, I'd like to see both of them, and I don't think we can do that tonight, but unless you have other ideas here, Mr. Kubas or Mr. Colling.
Maybe there's somebody else in the audience that wants to speak, I guess.
Oh, well, just a minute. We had plenty of time for you to speak. I mean, we had the hearings here.
I'm not involved in this whatsoever.
Okay.
I'm a developer here on a different agreement. I'm a development manager and a project manager in real estate for developments all over the state. I think I can help shed some light on it.
Well, you have some ideas?
Just clarification I may or may not have.
All right, come on up if you can help us out. Just state your name and we'll.
My name is Matt Dondino. I'm here on a completely separate issue, have no involvement in any parties of this whatsoever. I'm a project and development manager for Combined Asset Management LLC. Run a public hearing agenda later. As far as developments that we have done, we've done dozens around the state of North Dakota with and without impact fees. Special assessments, or we'd like to choose to, I guess, to explain them. They're always difficult. They're always challenging. They're always fair and unfair. The biggest way to look at it, perhaps the easiest way, and I understand that the city is going to go on a per square foot basis. I'm originally from Fargo, do the real estate in the Fargo area. It's a linear foot there is how we do it. It seems to be our standard. The way to look at a development like this, if you have a developer who's going to come in, we've done the same thing. We buy a parcel of land. We want to develop that parcel. We understand that to develop that land and to sell it, it's going to cost X amount of dollars. Once that land is decided, we find out how much it's going to cost. We know that that's our cost of doing business. If we come to a city and request help, essentially in this case, the developer is asking the Bank of Dickinson for a $1.2 million loan. That is a loan to that developer for their project. If you're in a mile from a county road and you want water to your farmstead, that's your cost. And anybody along that mile who wants to participate because they may be benefited or able to be benefited can share in the cost. If they don't agree, that's where a township board or a city commission, in your case, would come in and assess that cost within there. However, the cost to develop the land, the developer's expense, in this case, sounds like about $2.7 million. That's their cost. The Bank of Dickinson is going to give them $1.2 million. I'll be completely honest with you, that is a benefit to the developer to reduce their selling lot cost, to make their lots attractive. To walk away from a special assessment, without speaking out of turn, you have a city attorney, but I can tell you, would be unheard of. If there's a question, please let me know. We've gone through this a million times. But the $1.2 million is basically the benefit that the city has given to encourage development, to encourage economic activity, and that's what the developer is reaping the benefits for. If there is a directly benefited lot outside of that, that the city feels that they're getting a direct benefit from that $1.2 million loan, that's the lots that should be assessed for that benefit. So the benefit to the developer is reduced cash out front to make the payment. If you broke it to a simple number, if I knew it was going to cost me $5 million to build 100 lots, and I asked the city for $2 million, that means I could sell those lots for $30,000 a lot with $20,000 in specials. If the city didn't give me help, I'd have to sell the lots for $50,000 a lot, which the attractiveness of buying a $30,000 lot and not having me to take out the loan for $20,000 to pay the specials as a consumer is much better. Buying a $50,000 lot and having to put up front $50,000 is not as attractive of an offer. So the attractiveness that you guys are giving to the developer is going to be the fact that you're giving them $1.2 million on a 5-year note, essentially.
So you think it's wrong that they excluded their properties from?
Again, I'm third party outside of it.
Right.
I would call it unheard of. I would love that deal as a developer anywhere in the state of North
Sweetheart
Dakota.
deal, right?
The $1.2 million is the deal. That's what the developer's getting. Whether it's in 2 phases or 1, that's the deal. Excluding themselves from that doesn't make any sense. Because if there's no other landowners
Lots of
there,
events as the
if there's no other landowners there, they would have to pay $2.7 million to do the business they want to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Colling, tell me again, if we were going to have a meeting, you'd want that meeting when, so you can still have time to get the necessary legal work done for the county?
Mr. President, I think if we could have the meeting either later this week or Monday of next week, that should provide us with sufficient time to get the information to the county.
Okay. On my calendar, I could do this Friday afternoon, or I can do it Monday.
Do it Friday.
Friday works.
Friday work?
I'm open, either one.
Friday doesn't work for me.
Friday doesn't work for you? What about Monday at our regular time, Monday at 4:15? Or 4:30 is our regular time. Does that work for everybody? So, okay, if we want to look at the alternative we have here and an alternative with all the properties in, special assessing, you know, looking at these two together, the $1.2 million back against old properties, I think what I would like to see is, I'd like to see it on paper instead of our little computers. And you're going to have to present, and I think, again, we have to notify all the affected properties, and we've got to give them the opportunity to comment before we make a decision. But I think we absolutely have to make a decision and move this process along. Where I think with the turnover we had in our engineering staff, we haven't acted on this as promptly as we should have. So we made a lot of progress tonight, but I'd like to finish it off. And my sense is, I think that at least there's a majority of the commissioners that want to look at the second alternative. Is that?
I think he brought up an important point. The 1.2 is the incentive, which, again, if it meant that you had $50,000 lots or $30,000, you're asking the consumer's going to go to the bank for a $30,000 loan. City's going to offer the specials. You don't have to qualify for that loan. So that is your benefit, and that's how you reduce your costs as a developer. To exclude yourself from the project, and I thank you for coming up and talking, because I've been racking my brain trying to come up with a common sense scenario of why this is so wrong. It feels wrong, but it's hard to describe why it is. Here's your case in point.
Well, we have motions that table this until later in the meeting. I think officially I'd like to have a motion that tables both of these Porter's second subdivisions, Phase 1 and Phase 2, until next Monday at 4:30.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Any discussion?
I'd like to ask for one more thing, and it's maybe a real detail here, but in the case of Braun, I'd like to know at that meeting if Braun was seen as benefiting from water, sewer, and streets. I know Mr. Braun was in here a year ago or whenever it was, and we talked about that. And I think in the case of the other properties, I think it's pretty clear. Maybe not, but that particular property, I think we need to ask that question. Does he benefit from all three? And maybe he wasn't assessed that way, I don't know, but I'd just like to be able to understand that when we come back.
Well, when Mr. Kubas explained Phase 1, he said that was water, sewer, and street, which, you know, again, it wasn't just Braun that didn't benefit fully from water, sewer, it was Baker Hughes, because if you look at the North Industries specials that we assessed, that is where Baker Hughes got their water, sewer, street. So the Porter's second, Phase 1 and Phase 2, really for the 4 properties that they were wanting to assess it back to, it was like the gentleman said, really didn't, those improvements weren't for the adjacent properties. They were to bring this new development online.
Well, we're going to get an opportunity next Monday to
Talk ad nauseum about
yes,
this, right?
And we're really late on some other agenda items. So we have the motion, we have the second. We'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Stuckert.
Aye.
Mr. Steiner.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson.
Aye.
Mr. Altman.
Aye.
Chair votes aye, and the motion carries. Now, Mr. Colling, one other item, do we need to pass any motions about the special meeting?
No, Mr. President, we'll notice that with the press and post the notice.
Okay. And Mrs. Binstock, please send us out one of those Outlook, so we don't forget. We'll get that on the calendar. Okay. We'll go to our 5:15 timetable item. It's a special use permit, animal kennel appeal. And Mr. Cretan, are you introducing this?
That is correct,
Thank
Mr.
you.
President. Mr. President, Commissioners, this is an appeal by the applicant, Jared Toogood, of a decision made by the Planning and Zoning Commission on September 8th. Last month, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial, 3-2 vote, for a animal kennel proposed at 1181 South Main. The applicant is appealing that decision. They are here in the audience to present their case that the Planning Commission had made their decision in error. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so for Mr. Colling, the process here would be to ask the proponents for the animal kennel to speak, and then if there's anyone else that wishes to comment, we give them a chance to comment too. Is
That's
that-
correct, Mr. President, yes.
Okay. All right, well then, the way we'll do this is those that favor the animal kennel appeal here, we'll let you go first, and if there's anyone in the audience that opposes this, we're going to let them also speak. So we'll consider this a hearing then, we'll open the hearing, and we'll begin with those that represent the animal kennel. Just come to the podium, state your name, and then we're going to hear your comments.
Hi, my name is Jared Toogood, and I'm the one proposing to do this. I got a handout here for.
Thank you.
All right, I recently purchased the commercially zoned property located at 1181 South Main. I'm in the process of moving into the house. I'll be living there with my fiance, Sarah. She plans to open and operate the kennel as her full-time job, so there always will be someone on the site. I guess you guys kind of received some of the information as far as what we plan to do, so I don't need to get into all those details, but I'll kind of reiterate why I think this is a good idea. As far as it's a commercially zoned property, I think this fits very well into that use. I know there's some residents that are opposed, but it's in a commercially zoned area. Some of the residents that are opposed actually live on commercial properties too, operate their businesses. So I think it's a very fitting use for a commercial property. And I guess I know within the city, both Paw Claw Pet Palace and West Dakota Vet do some kenneling, have done more in the past, more based on the premise of there being an extreme need for it, not that they really want to. Both being zoned commercially, not having issues, never went through the special use permit process, but they were more doing it based on the need in the city, so there's a great need for it within the city. And then my fiance also visited with Bubba and Company in Fargo and some of the neighbors around there. And it's also located, as you can see in a couple of pictures there, in a commercial area that has residential right across the street. Actually, right across the street is State Farm Insurance Agent, and he also lives there. He's been there since 1998 and said that they're a good tenant and has no issues being across from them. The neighbors all stated that, I know there is some complaints about smell, that there's no issue with smell. Where that idea comes up that there is the type of kennels that people will operate as a part-time job, that they basically go to work all day, the animals go to the bathroom all day, and it gets cleaned at the end of the night or when they're off of work versus being cleaned as it happens, basically. And being that Sarah's going to do this as her job, she would be there at all times, and it would get taken care of right away. And I guess the other issue was dogs barking at night with the soundproofing. Same thing, all the neighbors at this case study basically said they heard no barking at night. A couple said that you'd hear barking during the day occasionally, but with the process of taking the dogs in when you have an issue into basically the quiet room to calm them down that's soundproofed, it's no different than a neighbor having a couple of dogs. And within the Fargo-Moorhead area, there's 11 animal kennels within the city limits. So I mean, it's a very viable business that can be done within a city if done properly. And I guess that's kind of what I had to say. If there's any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Toogood. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
Mr. Toogood, a couple things here. In the city of Dickinson, the current vet clinics that you referenced, do they have outside runs?
West Dakota does. And I know both of them are trying to get out of it just for the fact that they're so busy in their businesses that they're only doing it to basically help out. So,
Okay.
And I know Paw and Claw, they don't have outside runs, but they take the dogs out in the alley.
And you're talking about a maximum number of dogs at 18? So these all 18 would have access to outdoor runs during the day?
Potentially. I mean, that'd be something too. The chances of there being 18 is very unlikely. Typically, you're going to have 2 to 3. And I mean, I'd be willing to, if that's part of the issue, to downsize if that's something that would be the issue. But I know when they're all separated with concrete walls in between, even on the outside, it's not just fence, so the dogs are seeing each other and causing issues, but
You're purchasing a home there and a commercial building?
I've already purchased the property, and it's actually, the north lot would be an empty lot. The middle lot has a house on it, and I'd be living there. I'm actually in the process of moving into that property right now. And then the south lot is the metal building.
And that's the metal building with the two big garage doors on
Correct.
it? It's not the orange building?
Nope.
Nope, okay.
And I already purchased, and it was all 3 lots, so I currently own all 3 lots.
Mr. Toogood, did you send them pictures of what your building would look like when you were finished with it?
I didn't. I assumed that that was given. I guess I have a copy of what it would look like if we want to.
Yeah, I think we should.
And I know the question was asked at Planning and Zoning about where you would be putting the, what do I want to call it? The dog duty?
Mhm.
There is a cesspool, right?
Correct.
In that building that would
Yep.
not be going into the septic tank.
Nope, and I plan to visit with, if it moves forward, and that, I've kind of got that in there too, as far as visit with a civil engineer to have that thing, make sure it's sized properly, and if not, do what needs to be done in order to abide by basically the regulations for something like this.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
My comment would be that that building looks a lot better than the one that's there.
And I know there's a lot of uses too that, I mean, basically within a commercially zoned property, there's a lot of businesses that could be put in there that you can't oppose to just for the fact that it's commercial. It's a commercial type of business. I mean, you could put a mechanic shop in there, or a lot of different things like that without any objection because it's within basically the zoning. So I think there's a lot worse commercial applications that could be put into it that would benefit the neighborhood a lot more negatively.
What do you think?
Go ahead.
I was going to have Mr. Carton explain what a special use permit is too.
Sure. With respect to the special use permit, special use permit is a use that's not permitted outright. The reason for that is because it's a use that across the board may or may not be compatible with surrounding land uses. That's the reason there's an additional review for that compared to traditional or your standard permitted uses where if you meet the code, that use is allowed in that particular district. A special use permit, you got to factor in compatibility is the biggest issue. And this use was one that was designated as a special use permit because you have animal barking, like any other noise that's not a consistent noise. That is something that wears on people. I'm a dog lover. I have a new neighbor that's about 4 or 5 houses up, and their dog barks at sporadic times, and it does affect the quality of a neighborhood just like anything else. And that's the factors. Those are some of the factors that are involved with it: the use, the intensity, and the noise that are associated with that. So that's kind of the difference between a permitted use and a special use permit. Is that answering your question, Commissioner Dukar?
Halfway.
I have a follow-up. This is zoned commercially.
That is correct.
Yes.
Are dog kennels permitted in commercial zoning?
With a special use permit, they're permitted outright in the industrial zone.
Okay, but a commercial zone requires special use permit.
That is correct.
Okay.
Well, the other thing is, if this was given to him and it didn't work out, I mean, if we had a lot of complaints from the neighbors, this would have to be discontinued. And the other thing is, if you decide to sell it, it does not go with the sale of the property. The special use would have to be reapplied by someone else
That is correct. At
If
least
it-
as proposed.
If it's sold.
if it's sold.
As proposed by city staff, correct.
Right.
I think you guys also had something in there about living. Did you guys add something in there? I know there was discussion about, because I know there was some questions brought up about, well, you could do this, run it, you're not there. obviously I'm going to live there, I'm going to raise my family there. I plan to make it nice and do a good job. And I said I'd be perfectly open to that being, and I don't know if anything got added about that, but as far as living in the house right there versus, because I know the question came up, well, what if 6 months down the road you're like, I'm not going to live there anymore, I don't want to deal with the dogs barking, I'm moving out, and I'm just going to rent the house out, and I'm going to keep the kennel out here. I mean, that's not the plan by any means. We specifically, like Sarah's, really wants to do this and she wants to do it right. It's always been her dream. And part of that, the issues that she's seen, she's talked to all the kennels actually in Fargo, and the biggest issue that does come up is when people aren't around enough. You're basically not around. So that was one of the things we looked for, was someplace that you could live there, work there, you're always around if there's anything. So.
Just to give the commission a little background, and I was not at the planning commission. Steve Josephson, the city county planner, took over this particular case, and I don't know if Mr. Jackson wants to add to it. The concerns at the planning commission meeting were the noise that are associated with that. And there were several people from the surrounding neighborhood that live in the residence. They are non-conforming uses, let alone, nevertheless, they still have the right to live there in perpetuity, and they were opposed to that. And I don't know if any of them are here tonight to talk with respect to that. As part of your deliberation tonight, it's not provided as part of the application material. Whenever I've dealt with a contentious issue that's one part of an overall operation, you can consider putting a sunset clause for that. Oh, don't know what happened. Somebody's calling in.
Someone trying to call me?
Time's up.
Unplug it.
Okay. All right.
You got it unplugged?
Got it.
Down there?
I believe it's unplugged, Mr. President. I think the biggest issue, and there's going to be public here that will want to talk, is probably the issue with the noise or the dog run. And that could be something that if you wanted to, as part of your deliberation, you could look at that and put a sunset clause or a review after a couple of months, if you prefer. To have them come back, and then you could hear testimony, how well they're doing, without giving it a permanent approval. So that's just some ideas with respect to the petition tonight.
Mr. President,
Mr.
Ms.
Tanner.
Toogood, what is the amount you're going to have in construction of this building?
To get it completely, I guess we haven't done the full estimate on things yet.
100,000, 150?
I would say the 100,000 would be at most probably to get it.
Are you willing to risk 150,000 on us approving it, and then 3 months later, 4 months later, have us disapprove it?
I mean, if there's an issue with things not being done properly, that would be. I'm confident that we can do it.
Once it's built, are you 100% confident we won't see these same people here addressing the barking concern? Here's where I'm at. And I think it's a beautiful building. I think we need the service. And I think this was probably brought up at the prior meeting, is just the wrong location. And I can go into my own neighborhood, and one barking dog a block away sets off the motion to where the two dogs kitty corner in my backyard respond to it. Okay, so the people that may not be within the one block still have the concern of repetition down the line. And I'll guarantee you that you come to my house sometime, I'll show you how it works with the neighborhood dogs in my neighborhood. You know, so that's one of the concerns I have. You know, and then I want to address the noise issue on a separate. It wasn't a short time ago, we addressed a whole neighborhood of noise issue that was irritating to them, and they were losing sleep of it. And it came to the point where we almost asked a multi-million-dollar operation to shut down. They were able to take care of the noise, but we were at the very point of telling them to shut it down. And I would feel bad if we had to come to you in 3-4 months after it was built and said, you have to shut this down, and you're with a $100,000 to $150,000 building that can't be used. That's my concern. I like the project. I hope you can do it. I think I have the concern of the neighbors.
I just have just one general question. You know, you went before planning and zoning. I'm looking, they had 10 issues that were, you know, contingent on the special use permit being met. So Steve Josephson had laid out, you know, the staff recommendation, kennel hours, and 10 conditions for the your business to be approved in that area. So a lot of thought went into this from planning and zoning of what they thought your business would need to entail and the conditions that you would need to meet in order to satisfy and kind of commingle into that neighborhood. So they put a lot of thought into that. Even with those 10 conditions, even with the thought that went into approving a special use permit, and you were willing to meet all 10 of those special conditions, your request was still denied at that meeting by that board. And so now, not being happy with their answer, you've come before our commission to see if you can get a second chance. But what do you think was the main hangup that it was denied at planning and zoning when you were willing to meet those 10 conditions?
I think it's that notion of obviously the barking, that's what's brought up mostly. And that's why, you know, visited with other situations that are basically, I mean, like the one that I showed there, basically the same condition, and if done properly, that's basically where I did the case study showing that basically if it's done properly, yes, it can be done in this type of a situation. Like I said, there's 11 within the Fargo-Moorhead area within the city. So basically, I mean, I did more research to provide that this can be done. Yes, if you don't, I mean, if you just take a metal building and throw 20 dogs in there and don't do anything with them, you're going to have an issue.
Here's what I think. I think that you've done a lot of work in planning the business. I think you've done a lot of research, you know, in the Fargo area and what they have. And you present a lot of really good facts. Here's what I also know is that the people behind you are very reasonable, and they have each at one point or another started a business in that same neighborhood. If you look at your neighbors, I guess my just blanket statement would be, instead of taking the denial from planning and zoning and then coming for a second opinion from us, I think you'd be much stronger suited if you would meet with each of those businesses on an individual basis, and each of the people that have complained. I think you get a lot further, and the confidence level and maybe their willingness to take the risk on a new business and a young family in their neighborhood, because they were each extended that opportunity at one point or another as well. I don't think we're the deciding factor on this. I think that if you came back, either through planning and zoning or even to the commission, saying that I've met with the neighbors and we have all come to an agreement that they're willing to give this a try, I think you're coming in at a much stronger point. It's uncomfortable. You know, you're going to have to meet with, but you're going to have to live there anyways, and you're going to have to deal with them. If you're denied a second time, you're going to have some animosity, and you probably won't foster the best relationship as a neighbor. I think that if you would give yourself the time to go back and meet with them individually and really show the plans that you have here, I don't think it's unsurmountable. I don't think that it's undoable. I think that the approaches may be what's going to trip you up. And again, I know the people that live down in your neighborhood, and they've all had a leg up at one point or another to get a business started that maybe wouldn't be able to be in that neighborhood now. But it's working out, and they're good neighbors. And I guess that would be my approach if I were you. If I were in your shoes and I was serious and I was wanting to get this and I was wanting to make a $100,000 investment, I would get buy-in from all of the neighbors rather than getting an approval from another board and forcing it into the neighborhood. I would take it from a different approach, and I would get them on my side and come back and say, I've met with all the neighbors, we've discussed my plans, we've discussed every contingency possible, and I've satisfied that, and they're approving of it too.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Toogood?
Well, I don't have animals. I'm not an animal lover, but I did vote for the animal shelter because the community needs it. And I know we need a dog boarding kennel, and I would vote for it, but I suggest, since you already live there, these are all your neighbors, I think they should talk to you. I mean, I think they need to buy into it. It's just like saying, Miller Insulation, you can't be there, you know, because you're going to make my property value less, but yet you're there. And when I drove around the neighborhood and looked at some of the properties, I feel sorry for some of the people that live there and look across the street in a residential area at a lot full of equipment. That shouldn't be there, and I don't know how we as a city have not seen that. So I think everyone in that neighborhood has to get together. You are general commercial, and you need to work together. And I would agree with Commissioner Oltman 100%.
Yeah, I don't think it does us any favors to give it a blessing or a denial. I think that your strongest suit is to, and you do really have good neighbors, and I think they really are. I don't think anyone doesn't want to see a new business come to town. They just want to know that it's going to fit within their livelihood. And you've done a lot of research, and you're passionate about this. Take that passion to your neighbors, get their buy-in, and then we're a non-issue.
This is a public hearing. I mean, we really, I think, have an obligation to hear from both sides before we stake out our own positions. And Mr. Toogood, do you have additional comments that you would like to make? Are there other people here to speak on in favor of this?
I think there's a few other people. I guess I can leave anyone else.
Well, let's give them a chance to speak too.
Thanks for your time.
You're welcome. But if there's others that want to speak in favor, please come, state your name. And
I'm Janice Greenwood, and I'm Sarah's mom. And she is passionate about animals. She doesn't like dogs barking any more than the other person does. She would do everything in her power. She treats them like her kids. It would be no different to her having a dog kennel than her having a daycare, except she'd be much happier with a dog kennel than a daycare. And as far as the noise goes, there's dogs bark everywhere. I mean, it's something that you hear right when they first start, but it doesn't affect your day. I live next to people who run their diesel trucks all night long in a residential area, right by my bedroom window. That bothers me, but there's nothing I can do about it. You know, so I think it's great to ask the neighbors to buy in, but I think at this point it's a little late. They've already said no, so I think they need to have some sort of backing saying that, yes, you guys do believe this would be a viable business, and there is a need for this business in Dickinson. There are people that I know that don't have places to board their pets. And a lot of people end up not going places because they don't have a place or a person that will come and take care of their pets. And with that, that's all I have to say. Do you have any questions for me?
any comments or questions?
And the fact of the matter is that she's going to have plenty of help. Her whole family lives in Dickinson, as well as Jared's. they're going to be here. They're not going to sell the house in 6 months or move out or whatever. So there's plenty of help to make sure somebody was there all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Paulson. I am a licensed veterinary technician working for West Dakota Vet Clinic here in Dickinson. Sarah and I have been friends since high school, and I know this has been a dream of hers for most of her life. Jared and I knew each other from high school as well. I've been employed at West Dakota Vet Clinic now for just over a year. Yes, we do boarding, but we only do boarding on an as-needed basis because we have an extra doctor on hand now, and we need all of the kennel space we have available. I also do in-home pet sitting because I know of the need in the community for a boarding facility. A lot of times, though, that doesn't work for people because they need the animal outside of their house for some unknown reason. There's a boarding facility that was opened up by Erin Warner on the southwest side of town. She has been at full capacity now since she pretty much opened. I believe that she is booked well into November, almost to Christmas at this point in time. There's a boarding facility in Taylor, North Dakota, who is also full for the next few months as well. As an employee for a veterinary clinic, we do reference people to these boarding facilities, and we try our best to spread the need. But at this point in time, we've kind of reached our limit. And having another one in town would not only make our lives a little bit better, but as a whole, I think would make the community better. At this point in time, though, it's very hard to find a place to put anything because of the expansion of town and having a lot of residential and commercial meeting each other. The location that Jared and Sarah chose is very half and half, I guess you could say. It's very residential, and at the same respect, like you said, there are equipment right across the street and a lot of industrial looking zones just right across the street. Being as the plot of land backs up right onto an open field, there would be no neighbors to the west, just to the north and south. And I do believe that Jared does need to make some kind of effort to get to know his neighbors, of course, and show him the plans and everything. But I guess on the more professional side of things, as a boarding person, and the way that West Dakota Vet Clinic works, we do have outdoor runs, but we do not let the dogs all out at the same time. If it's nice outside, they get to go out for short periods of time. Otherwise, we walk them out on leashes individually. I don't know how our neighbors feel about the noise of our vet clinic, but I do know that we are more or less in an industrial zone, so it doesn't really matter. But I can tell you now that the smell, noise factor has never been an issue for most people. It's been more of an issue for us to deal with other things going around us than about people dealing with the noise of the barking dogs where we're located. At this, I guess that's all I really have to say about things. I mean, do you have questions?
You know, I guess I would just add, Sarah, that had been the case before, but you actually have a lot of residents around you now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've had whole neighborhoods come and develop
Right.
kind of on the doorsteps
Right.
of your facility.
Mm-hmm. Right, and those residents, I can't speak for them. I don't know how they feel about having a vet clinic right to the north of them. Granted, it's considerably amount of space if you think about it.
Sure.
But they still have to deal with the fact that we do have dogs and cats and horses and cows and pigs all coming around their general living vicinity. And at this point in time, it doesn't seem to be an issue, so.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Thank you for appearing.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Chris Truesdale, and I am new to Dickinson. I am a pet lover and an owner for 48 years of dogs. And it was one of the first questions that I had when I worked here, or came here to live, where can I board my pets? And basically there is nowhere to board my pets. And so I feel that if Mr. Toogood is willing to put forth the effort and the monetary situation as far as building this facility, and he's willing to take that on with the knowledge that he can have his license pulled or be turned down by the city to have to remove his business, then so be it. I think it's a great thing for the city. I think it's a necessary thing for the city, and I think it's just a good progression for this town to have this facility available to those of us that have moved here and have nowhere to board our pets. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for the shelter? Or for the kennel, I guess? Okay, we'd invite those who are opposed to this to come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments also.
My name is Karen Lang. I am a neighbor to the east. I'm not a business owner, and I do overlook the equipment. The equipment doesn't make any noise, doesn't bother me. I am a dog owner, so I know what a barking dog can be like. Barking dogs do irritate me. You know, one of our dogs barks, one of our dogs doesn't bark. And when she goes on, you know, if she's barking over something, we quiet her down. When you get 18 dogs together, you're going to have barking. I don't care if you're taking 2 or 3 out at a time. I guess my biggest concern is with the noise and with the enforcement. We're outside city limits. We call the sheriff's department. There is no animal control officer outside of city limits. I'm a nuisance caller when I call with a barking dog. The sheriff's department, the police department are swamped. So how long does it take for them to respond to a call? I don't want them responding to my call when we've got a violent act going on. There are higher priority calls than a barking dog. At what point do I go to the city? If it's the nuisance, I go to the county because the sheriff has to take care of it. The city is the one who enforces the code. When do I go to the code? Who decides who enforces what part of it? And I think that was the biggest part of the discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission, is that it's an ordinance that would be very difficult at best, quoting you, Mr. Colling, you said it would be very difficult at best to enforce. Because it is something, I call, the dog is barking now. So the sheriff doesn't get out there for an hour, the dog is no longer barking. How many times do I call before they're wondering if I lost it? You know, and by the time it goes to the city and you get code enforcement people out there, that dog may not be around. There may be only one dog at the facility that day. So whoever enforces that issue. Part of the conditions were that if there was a change in ownership, you know, that the special use would have to be reapplied for. The property owner at the time was Galen Kuntz, and Mrs. Dukart, you disclosed that you were the selling agent and he was your brother. Since that date, the property has sold. So, you know, even if it's grandfathered in, Mr. Toogood is the owner, but he keeps referencing that his fiancée Sarah would run the business. I wish them well, but if things don't work out, who's the business owner? Does the special use permit go with the property, or does it go with the business owner? Is he going to continue to run this proposed kennel if it is approved, if things don't work out, or does he forfeit the special use permit if the operator of the kennel is no longer involved? We're families living in the neighborhood. We are not all business owners. Even though there's only a few of us, it affects us all. We recognize the need for a kennel in this town. We have dogs. We know how hard it is to board animals. We're just opposed to this location. Putting it in the midst of a residential situation we do not feel is best for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Matt Hines. I own the property adjacent to the north of Mr. Toogood's now.
And I'm along with Mr. Steiner, how he's talked about the investment. I've been in that building. I was good friends with the previous owners. It's an old building. It needs a lot of work, and I know it can be good, but it's a lot of money to stick into that old building from the 70s. There's a lot of work that has to be done. I've been in it. I know there's oil stains. There's soot everywhere. I mean, there's a lot of work that has to be done to it. It's not a tight, closed-up building anymore. I mean, I also believe with Mr. Altman, too, about having to talk with the other residents in the area. He did talk to me briefly. I guess maybe he caught me on a bad day. I just didn't want to discuss much. I discussed some. You know, my wife worked at a kennel before. I know what it's like. I didn't like her working there. She left, went on to a different business because she didn't like it. The smell was terrible. When I went to go and visit her at work outside and stuff. I am opposed to the noise also. I live right next to it. The dogs would be out on the kennel on my side. I have seen the building proposement. The company I work for got the notice, and I seen it right away. I mean, I know some of it doesn't meet code. That's nothing to do with this meeting or nothing, but I know we need it. I just hate to see them stick a lot of money into it, and when there's a lot of neighbors, pretty much all the neighbors in the area are opposed to it.
Any comments or questions?
So are you opposed to it, or you're?
I'm not, no. I mean, I know we need it in this community, but I don't think it's the right place. I know the one gal talked about Warner. She's out in agriculture is where she is. She's an ag. I mean, she's out on a section of land all by herself. No one has to deal with it. I mean, the other people around her are also farmers. They don't mind it. I'm at a home that's right adjacent to it. I bought my house knowing I had neighbors, and I knew I had a RV store behind me, and I knew I had another business beside me. I knew that going in. Now I'm as a homeowner, and I love the area I live in, and I like my neighbors, and the little bit I talked to Jared, he seems like he's a nice guy. It's just, I don't think it's a good fit for that area, and I'm not a big fan of it.
But you do understand it is general commercial.
I do understand that. My house is zoned commercial also. I do understand that, and I had to get a permit at my house before I bought it too, in order to rebuild if anything happened.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Mary Olheiser, and I live to the east of this property, and I am opposed to it mainly because of the barking dogs. We hear dogs from the trailer court all the time. It's not nice to go out on Sunday afternoon and sit on your deck and you can hear this dog's tied up and whining and that dog wants to play and whatever, but that's their choice. That's how they deal with their animals. I personally don't have any animals at the time. I do like them. I think there's a need for it. I just don't think this is the proper place for it. Most of us have lived in this area for a long time. My husband and I have lived there for 35 plus years. The Millers have been there for longer than that. The Langs have been there close to 20. Most of us don't care for this type of deal to go through. I'm sorry that I know that there's a need for it, but I just don't think that I want it in my area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we'll declare the public hearing closed on this. Mr. Colling, you're going to have to kind of review the process and the options available to the commission here.
Mr. President, the appeal was made by Mr. Toogood. The decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission was to deny the special use permit. I believe your options would be to affirm the Special Assessment Commission's recommendation or to overturn the Special Assessment Commission's recommendation. If you affirm the Planning and Zoning Commission, the special use permit will be denied. If you decide to overturn the Planning and Zoning Commission, you would be agreeing to issue the special use permit as provided in the staff report with the conditions that were noted therein.
So if we wanted to reverse the planning and zoning, but wanted to attach other conditions to it, is that option available to us too, or is it either take it as it was presented, or agree with the planning and zoning and deny it?
If there are additional conditions that you would like to assess or like to impose upon the special use permit, you can do that. That's within your authority as well.
Well, I'm confused. Planning and zoning recommended approval. When did they change it?
No.
No.
Not now. They did at the planning and zoning meeting. They recommended approval.
They did not. The Planning and Zoning Commission denied the special use permit, or recommended denial of the special use permit.
That's correct. Yeah, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial. The staff report recommended approval with 10 conditions. So the staff report is just from staff's perspective.
Okay, we got a different story here now. Okay.
No, it's in the materials. The city staff recommended approval with those 10 conditions.
That's what I wanted to
When they got
clarify.
in front of planning and zoning, then it failed 3-2 or failed 2-2?
3-2. 3-2 was recommended denial.
Okay.
I'm afraid if planning and zoning would have recommended approval, we'd still have the same people sitting here. Just
And
different
that's
presented
okay.
roles.
I mean, I think everybody should be heard. That's why we're here.
You know, I guess, are we on that point?
Well, go ahead. we're done with the, now is the time to state your opinions.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, if you're able to bridge that gap with the neighbors, and I guess I would just say to the neighbors in general, too, you know, Miller Welding, Kuntz RV, all of those are great businesses that we have in our community, as well as the other adjacent businesses that you have there today. I would suspect that if any one of those businesses came to planning and zoning in this time and asked to have their business put in place, knowing that it's commercial, residential, it's kind of a hodgepodge of different uses down there. I don't know if they would get the same opportunity that they had many years ago too. And so I would just say, you know, it's a big risk to open up this business with a special use permit. I don't know that any of the other businesses down in that corridor would take that same leap of faith and that same risk to open up an RV place, a welding place, a truck place, anything like that on a special use condition that could be pulled at any point. That's a lot of capital up front, taking a big risk that you're going to run your business as you say it will. And I guess before I would take that risk, because that is a big risk with a special use permit, I would want to be sure that I had gotten everybody in my neighborhood on board with it so that you had the maximum chance for success, maximum buy-in, because it'll be disheartening for you. It would be disheartening for you if we approved it today, you went out on a limb, invested $100,000 only to have your special use permit taken away. I guess just for me, if I was going to take that calculated risk, I would want to have the best chance of having that succeed.
You know, I feel bad that the neighbors are assuming there will be dogs barking. I mean, we're not even giving them a chance to prove that it won't happen. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough decision to make, but if Jared wants to take the risk, I still would vote for it.
I wouldn't be too tough on the business owners out there. When those businesses were built, they were a ways outside the current city. You know, so
I'm not being tough on them. I'm just saying, you know, the whole environment has changed as far as we see it every day of making that tough decision of what fits in where and how.
I think the thing we have to remember, this area developed, I'm sure, before there was any zoning out
Right.
there. Or at least if there was, it wasn't enforced. And so today, yes, it's zoned commercial, but the land use is mixed use. It's commercial and residential. And there are, I believe, 3 homes that are, well, 4 homes, I guess, that are quite close to this building. As far as a summary of planning and zoning, the vote itself speaks to the obvious that it was a difficult decision, and it was. But I think it came down to, why introduce this in an area that does have significant residential. There's a reason that a dog kennel isn't simply allowed in a GC area, in a commercial area, and that a special use permit is required. There's a reason, so that we can look at it a little bit closer. And in the end, as difficult as it was, that's why planning and zoning came down on the side that this just isn't the right location.
But you do understand that the homes cannot be rebuilt there if they do burn down?
But that has nothing to do with this particular request.
I know, but it's still general commercial.
Other discussion? Well, you've heard Mr. Colling explain our options.
Excuse me, I realize the public hearing part is closed. However, surely we are not all general commercial out there. Many of us are residential, and we have no general commercial. Another general commercial that is out there has the right to rebuild. So categorizing that if the homes are destroyed, they cannot be rebuilt is false. It's misleading. We have residential homes that if something happened, would be rebuilt.
On what property? Your property, right? Because you're blocked where it's residential.
The only home in the area that could not, that you keep referencing, is the subject home. All the rest of the 4 in the neighborhood can be rebuilt. They are residential. The general commercial one has the exemption, he can rebuild.
I don't. We doing double jeopardy here?
I would have to see that to verify that. Basically, the way that, nevertheless, basically, just for the commission's purpose, if you're in a general commercial zone or a commercial zone, and you have a residential property, if it's damaged or destroyed more than 50%, you would be prohibited from rebuilding unless you're granted a variance through the Board of Adjustment. Unless there is a prior decision made by Board of Adjustment or something to that effect. So that's just the general rule that we have currently today. That would be applicable unless there is a prior decision made by a board that had the right jurisdiction to make that call.
Well, and that's what the banks and the insurance companies tell us too. So, I'm sorry. That's the information I'm getting is coming from the real estate industry.
I personally think we're putting way too much weight on homes burning down out there.
Lots of probabilities, and we should deal with just the fact.
The issue isn't whether or not the homes can be rebuilt or not. That can be another research project. If the zoning is general commercial, there are just residential properties that are in a general commercial zoned area right now. But again, that's really not the issue. I think Commissioner Jackson described it very well. Whether it's zoned general commercial or not, formally the issue is that, or the situation, the reality is that in effect you have currently an area that's really a mixed zone. And maybe 30 years from now it'll all be commercial, or 50 years from now will be, but we have other areas in our community, in a sense where the community has grown into what used to be the county, now becomes the city limits, or now is in the city ETZ, and you inherit conditions that if you were starting with a new piece of ground today, you wouldn't develop that way. But the reality is that's what you inherit, and you live with that, you work with that. So before we get too far off the topic, is there other things you want to say specific to this issue? Does anybody want to venture out and offer a motion one way or the other here?
Mr. President, I move we confirm recommendation of plan and zoning.
Mr. Steiner has moved that we confirm the recommendation of planning and zoning, which would also be then to deny the appeal. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second.
We have the motion, the second. Further discussion.
Mr. President, I just want to make a comment here that, my decision isn't based on whether I like pets or hate pets. It's based on, and we referred to it many times here, quality of life in Dickinson, and we've addressed the situation and so on. I've met Mr. Toogood on one other occasion, and he impressed me as a very good man. And in this case, he wants to do what's good. No doubt there. I'm not questioning whether we need this here, and so on. But when it comes down to the community, and that's what we have out there, versus this type of proposal, I have to come down on to the community and we're on their stance right now. That is where I was with my recommendation or motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Steiner. Comments by any other commissioners?
It's tough. It's really tough because the neighbors don't want it, but the community wants it, so I vote no on your motion.
Yeah, it's just, like Mr. Jackson said, if it was not an area of contention, it wouldn't have been a special use permit. It would have been a given for the property, and we wouldn't be here having this discussion if there weren't some inherent possibilities of people being opposed to that as a general use in any area where we have general commercial. It would need to be a special use. And like I said, we all know that we need this. This might not be, or it may be the right location, but I think the decision's been made on this one as far as the planning and zoning board.
Thank you, Mr. Oldman. Anybody else? There's no other discussion. We'll proceed to vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
No.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes no. The motion carries 3-2. We're going to move on our agenda now to our 5:30 timetable, which is a public hearing regarding the homeless shelter. And in the interest of time, I'm going to suggest that if there's someone opposed to this homeless shelter, we'll let you speak first. So if there's anyone that's opposed, just come to the podium, state your name, and we'll hear your comments. Any opposition? Is there anybody left here that's in favor? We have some, okay. We'd certainly listen to your public input, but I think it would help your cause a lot if you didn't say anything. We've been here a long time, but if you want to talk, we'll stay.
I'll say just
Okay.
My name's Bill Kelly. I'm the executive director of the Dickinson Churches United for the Homeless that runs this project First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Coling, Mr. Corton, the police department, the fire department, city commissioners, Mr. President. We've all teamed up to solve a growing problem in Dickinson, and I just wanted to put it on public record that, you know, we really appreciate all the teamwork that is taken to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So, Mr. Catan, is this your resolution? I mean, what do we have here?
Mr. President, we have an ordinance. This is the first application from our recently adopted ordinance from last meeting by the Dickinson Churches United for the Homeless. What you need to do tonight is vote on a resolution or an ordinance to approve the temporary homeless shelter. Staff has proposed 9 conditions, and I would recommend that you include those as part of your adoption tonight.
And Mr. Kelly, does your group accept those 9 conditions that?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So this is a resolution, is it resolution 46? Okay. Is there?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 46.
Second.
We have the motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Mr. Kelly, you were very persuasive.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Moving right along, we're down to tab 7, Public Works. Our Public Works Director isn't here. We have a Dickinson 2014 road maintenance contract. Who is making the introductory comments? Anybody?
Mr. President, I'll take that one.
Okay, Mr. Coling.
Mr. President, Commissioners, the agreement you have before you is an engineering agreement with Dow HKM. This is an agreement for design and construction management services for the road maintenance project for 2014. At this point, the city estimates probably due about just under $3 million of road maintenance, chip seal, and mill and overlay projects in 2014. This contract for design services is $75,000. The engineering firm bidding and construction management services are billed out at an hourly rate up to the amount of $165,000. City staff would recommend approval, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Coling. You've heard his introduction and recommendation. Are there any comments or questions?
I make a motion to approve Dickinson 2014 road maintenance contract.
Okay, we have the motion for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
We have the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're going to vote. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Tab 8, Community Development. Mr. Curtin, I think these are all yours.
Yes, Mr. President, I will be as brief as I can. The first one is a rezoning petition. This is a second reading for Prairie Hills 4th Edition rezoning from single-family residential to limited commercial. Staff recommends approval. We have a modified ordinance in front of you. Because the applicant has satisfied one of the 2 conditions, I would just recommend that you approve it tonight with the 1 condition instead of 2, as previously noted.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curtin. You've heard his introduction. Any comments or questions? This is a reading for an ordinance, so if there's anyone from the public that would like to comment regarding ordinance 1527, you may do so now. Come to the podium, state your name, we'll hear your comments.
Again, my name is Matt Dondino from Combined Asset Management. I'm the project and development manager for the company. As was previously indicated, we took care of one of the 2 conditions, and I just wanted to verify. I did get a email from Steve Josephson earlier today saying that that second condition would be handled, waived. I'm not sure. I did bring an application if you do need it for the future land use update. So just looking for guidance, and if you need that, I can give that to you, and we hopefully we'll have both conditions satisfied.
Actually, the conditions are, it's just that, and just to clarify the issue and expedite the process, you could leave the condition in there, the park fees need to be paid. You provided the certificate for it, that issue is resolved, so.
Perfect.
The prior one with the comprehensive plan amendment, after further review, we realized it was no longer necessary, so that's why we removed it prior to the meeting, and that's why you have the modified ordinance in front of you tonight. I'll just recommend that you approve the ordinance tonight, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Is there a motion regarding the second and final reading of ordinance 1527?
Mr. President, before we do that, if I could.
Sure.
This piece of property, I think the rezoning is fine. I don't think there's any issue about that. But this piece of property has an unpaved street adjacent to it on the east side, correct? I think we need to do something as part of this action to make it clear that we're going to require this property owner to pave his half of that street. Normally we do this with a new subdivision, and there's no question about that. This is a little bit unique because it's an old subdivision. It's 15 or 20 years old or whatever it is. But we've got an unpaved street. We could easily get into a situation where the property to the north, which is not yet platted, could be doing their streets, and we could have this short piece, which is only, I think, 150 feet or something, that doesn't get paved. So, you know, with the advice of Mr. Coling and maybe others, whether we make it a requirement of the rezoning or make it a requirement of the building permit. We state in this motion that the building permit process will require that a building permit would not be granted until the street has been paved or arrangements made. I think we need to do this.
Mr. President, Commissioner Jackson, Commissioners, that's not a matter that I believe we've discussed as a staff. I think the paving of roads surrounding that site would be something that the site development plan review would look at. That would happen when the building permit is issued, and if you would like to make that contingent, I think we can give instruction to staff that the building permit review team would look at that at the time of the building permit application is received. I'm not sure where that is in the pipeline as to whether the building permit application has been received yet, but I think we would take care of it at that time.
That is correct. No application has been submitted, Commissioner Jackson. Like I've mentioned to you, in the current policy on the engineering side would be that the half section of that road would need to be paved prior to CO. I would recommend, if you do propose a condition tonight, that it would be not prior to issuance of a building permit, but prior to CO, certificate of occupancy of the building.
Okay.
Mr. Corton, where is this property? I'm having trouble trying to figure this out.
It would be it'd be several hundred feet to the east of where the Kostelecki Plaza is at.
Oh, okay.
And it's right there at the extension of 16th Avenue,
All
that you
right,
see.
thank you.
Yes.
These two lots, we actually own 11 lots on the north side and south side of 15th. These two are kind of separated from our other, which is why we're looking for the rezone. These two lots, we've had a lot of interest for a commercial use, spa, salon, that type of deal, which is what we're looking for. The part that we're trying to figure out is, again, going with special assessments, even if you want to go down that route, that road has been stubbed in for quite some time. We even had at one point questioned the city about removing the right-of-way so that we could have another lot there, since it hasn't been used. There are potential for subdivision to build out above it, or north of it, up on the hill, so that road may be used at that point. At that point, that developer, when they go through to look for the access in, our stance as a developer would be that the developer to the north would need to look at the cost of bringing access into their site. Since the city already has a right-of-way deeded, that right-of-way to get to their site, we would believe would be for the developer to the north. As it is, to put a, I guess a line item on the use of the land that we have to put that lot in. All the other lots that we have there, the access would come off of 15th, not off of the adjacent road. And perhaps we may even, with the two, let's call them mini malls or strip malls, we may just join parking lots all the way across, therefore not having access at all from 15th or 16th. I guess to require us for one of those lots to pave the road alongside that we wouldn't technically even use, we would prefer not to have to do. But obviously, that's on your hands as the commission to try to figure out what's best for that. But we do have the ability to access the 15th. That's what the other lots will do, as well as the strip malls have done, which is what we would anticipate if we were to build out. But again, we would expect that when we get to the actual building permit stage of what the design for the land would be. In the world as it is, it could end up the adjacent landowner might want to purchase and make a larger strip mall too. Who knows what will happen with it? But we would request that we don't have a additional condition to pave a street we may not directly use.
I think I heard you say that, are you saying that when that street is built to the north that you shouldn't have to pay for the part adjacent to your property?
I would suggest that the developer developing the land to the north, looking for access to their road, using a city right-of-way that's already deeded, would pay the cost. If the city required, or if the city were to develop a special assessment district, as previously talked about tonight, I do believe that a per linear foot or whatever the city standard will be for that area, special assessment be pursued at the time to see if it would be something that would be worthwhile. If that street were there and it would be easier for ourselves or a future owner of the property to put an access off of that street, I do believe that that would be something that we would have a benefit from. At this point, I don't see a benefit to it, or what could be a limiting factor on the saleability of the lot, knowing that the next potential landowner may have to pave 100 feet of a 66-foot wide right-of-way.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with you, but if this were a new subdivision, we'd be asking you to pave the streets. There's no question about that. And as you said, in an improvement district, I think that it can be shown there's benefit to that property. I'm not sure that, and it's up to engineering, but I'm not sure access will be granted off 15th to that property. It'll probably have to come from that side street, whatever it is. That's what's happened up and down 15th on those corner lots. It's always come from the side streets. I don't care how we do this, but I just think we have to ensure that this property owner pays for his share of that street.
Well, now I like the way we get our information electronically until we get a situation like this. Now it's nice to have a paper map and we can actually look at things. I think Mr. Jackson has raised a good point, and I'm not prepared to vote to pass this ordinance until I'm convinced that his concern is properly dealt with. I mean, if we can't do it here tonight, since we're going to meet next Monday, we can put this on the agenda for next Monday, and you can provide us with the maps so we understand what we're looking at, and maybe city staff has a good alternative on how to deal with this, and you might meet with the owner of the property too to work that out. But yeah, we've had issues before now where we've had street issues that nobody claims they really need, but they all like to have them paved. And
Mr. President, much of the controversy that we're seeing in spreading the specials tonight is because we had to pull other properties into these projects. We don't want to do that again, if we can help it.
Well, I don't see why we can't.
If I may suggest, I do have maps, both a plat type map, a GIS map, as well as an overhead satellite picture, if you would like to see them. I would also maybe.
Would it make a difference to you if we acted on this next Monday night as opposed to this Monday night?
I did fly an airplane out here to get here today, so yes, financially it may, but I would propose in lieu of doing something like that, if the city were to pass a motion with some type of verbiage of the developer waives right to protest special assessment, future special assessment when that is put in. So if a new developer does come in to pave their street into their development and does ask for a city contribution, that at that time the special assessments will be able to be assessed to the property.
To your property?
Correct.
But somebody else will own your property by the time we do that.
Well, not only that.
I've got a plan to have a
And
building
they
on
will
it,
be
so-
upset when we special assess it. Mr.
I'm not
Kurtz.
sure we will be special assessing in the first place, I'm sorry.
Right.
And secondly, that street should be built now while that property is developed. We shouldn't be waiting till the
Right.
property to the north. It should be done now while
Right,
your
and
property is.
I guess as our view on it, and I believe I brought this up at the planning and zoning meeting, but we've done developments all over the state of North Dakota. I can tell you that this particular area has an apron with a 66-foot wide right-of-way. The lot is 120 feet deep. We're going to have to pave about 100 feet, which means we're going to have to put in a sewer connection and a water connection, tap into the street, and run it 100 feet, and then pave over the top of it. At which point, whether it's the city or the next developer, is going to have to tee into it again and line into it again. So you're making more juncture points, which, from a developer, I guess, look at it, more junctions are more failure points. And those joints, as they're put in, will be the city's responsibility to maintain, since it is a city right-of-way. So my anticipation would be, it would be potentially setting up for more issue down the road. However, I do believe that being the one lot is on the corner, knowing that special assessments are possible against any lot, being a real estate professional as well, the lot will be sold with, knowing that if that street gets put in, special assessments would be likely. And that's interest of all disclosure, as any standard real estate transaction would portray. These two lots are anticipation, and we don't have a permit in yet to the city. Our anticipation is we've already got a building designed to be put on them, operated and owned by our company, as it is right now. As everybody knows, in the world of business, things change all the time. However, I do think that the feasibility of us putting in 100 feet of street, the benefit isn't going to add to anything past that. I would think it'd be more prudent for down the road for us to pay our share of that improvement when the entire street is put in.
Mr. Kubas.
Does Combined Asset Management own both properties east and west of the, I don't know the name of the platted street, but.
Yeah, and I can, like I said, I've got maps here I can show you guys. We do own both sides of that right away.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, at some point, when it goes in anyway, both these lots changing to commercial hopefully, as well as the residential R1 we have on the other side, will both be assessed.
No, I understand. I think there's some other ordinances that Ed might be more familiar with, landscaping ordinances, sidewalk ordinances, that we would require, and that makes it difficult to put in sidewalk if the street isn't there. Just a detail thing, but it's kind of a cart before the horse situation if we would put that in without a street.
Mr. President, I could just talk about our current policy that we do have. I mean, we would require, and I have let prospective buyers of the property know that they would be required to pave half that road. Now, from engineering's perspective, we discussed that today, there's two ways of looking at it. You either require them to pave that half section of road and deal with the pros and cons of a half section of road, or something that we could look at in the future is they pull in their money for that linear feet of that road, that half section of road, and then we put it as a CIP, or whenever that road is developed, that money is put back in there and it's done at one time. There's two different ways to address that issue, but that road would need to be paved in order, or at least money set aside in an escrow account before they can get a certificate of occupancy. On another issue, we would prohibit access off of that 16th Avenue because all around it is residential. Per our code, you need to be off of, if you have the choice between residential and commercial, you need to choose the commercial access point. So they would not have an access point off of 16th Avenue. That being said, they are benefited by that. They are a corner lot just like any other one. It's part of the connectivity that we have for the city. We are all involved in it together, and if he was developing as today, he would be required to pave that. So I think that it's only fair that they either pave it or they put in a share, and we do that as part of an escrow account for a future fund whenever that road is paved for. That's two ways of looking at it, Mr. President.
Well, it's getting real late. And what I'm interested in right now is satisfying Commissioner Jackson. I think he has a valid point. What is the best way to do that? If we can do it tonight, fine. If we can't do it tonight, I'm prepared to do it Monday night. But, you know, I don't want to be doing engineering at these meetings.
Absolutely, and I'd be very satisfied just attaching to the motion that staff can reach agreement with Mr. Dunn, you know, on some assurance, escrow, fine, or have it done before CO.
Can we do that with an ordinance, you know, attach a condition to it? I don't think we...
Mr. President, Commissioners, I think if we were looking at attaching new conditions to the ordinance, I'd prefer the opportunity to talk with Mr. Corton and Mr. Kubas and develop a condition that's going to work and something that we're not sort of engineering on the fly.
I don't think you have to physically be here next Monday. Yeah, I mean, if you can be part of those discussions and in a sense, the four of you come in and say, this is what we agreed to. It meets Mr. Jackson's point that he raised here. I mean,
could I propose, just for the sake of hopefully an easy solution? I do agree that the street will need to be paved at some point. We are going to benefit from the street. So like I said, if it's future special assessment or whatnot, we are going to benefit. I'm not disagreeing with that in the least bit. I think any type of surety or escrow account at this point would be difficult to lock down simply because we don't know what the engineering and paving costs would be, but I would maybe propose that a simple condition of road need to be paved prior to issuance of certificate of occupancy is a very easy one. We could build a building and we just couldn't use it.
Well,
and I think that, or at time of building permit.
If that can be written into the ordinance, then we'll act on that ordinance a week from now. And I don't, what we'll ask these gentlemen a week from now is, have you discussed these changes with the developer? Do they agree with them? Are they supportive? And if they say this meets Mr. Jackson's needs, or the point he raised, and he says, yes, it does, and they say we've talked to the developer, he's in agreement, I can't guarantee what the other four will do, but I'm going to vote for it, and I think we'll be done. But I don't think we should try to craft the language here tonight. And if it is not delay your project at all, like I said, we already have a special meeting to deal with the other issue. Put this one on the agenda first, and we'll deal with the others. How's that?
Mr. President, we will have a conference call with Matt sometime this week, so we'll be in contact by email and set that up.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. We got number 2 here.
Mr. President, I will simplify. They're both the same subdivision. No changes have been, no changes from the first reading for both of these next 2 items. Staff has recommended approval. There are no conditions attached to either of them. So if you want to make motions right after one another.
All right. Well, is there anyone here that wants to speak to ordinance 1528? If so, come to the podium, state your name. There's no one that does. Is there a motion regarding ordinance 1528
I'll make that motion
to approve?
to approve ordinance 1528.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? We'll go ahead and vote then. Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. The motion carries. Next one is ordinance 1529. Anyone from the public wish to comment? There's no one from the public. Is there a motion regarding 1529?
Move to approve, Mr. President.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Stuckert?
Aye.
Mr. Altman?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion carries. You have a report?
Mr. Chairman, I'll defer comments.
Good report. Any reports or comments by city commissioners? Anyone from the public that would like to address city commission? If so, come to the podium, state your name. There's no one. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We're adjourned.